Chapter 1592. When Wang Ling suggested using the Chaos Divine Feather as a material to upgrade his spirit sword, Zhang Zipi couldn't help breaking out in a cold sweat. He's just a kid after all, he's such a prodigal. This feather was many times more valuable than the Supreme Shrouding Corpse painting, and it was actually used to strengthen a spirit sword. What if the strengthening failed? Although Zhang Zipi was in the corpse wrapping painting, he was also an erudite and knowledgeable person. The imaginary world in the painting allowed Zhang Zipi to surf the internet in the corpse wrapping painting. This reminded him of the computer game he had played many years ago called Tainted Milk Powder. He was about to vomit from upgrading his equipment. If he failed, he would have to start all over again, because in the world of the shrouded corpse picture, Zhang Zipi couldn't directly top up his money. Therefore, his wealth in these modern online games was earned through playing games day after day. Cultivators could stay awake for long periods of time. In addition, Zhang Ziqin was essentially a dead man. Therefore, a dead man did not need to rest, nor did he need to worry about his liver being worn out after staying up late for a long time. Because Zhang Ziqian did not have a liver that could be worn out. After accepting the divine feather, Wang Ling's heart was as calm as an ancient well. He knew that Zhang Zidan was definitely cursing him for being a wastrel in his heart. But to be honest, Wang Ling had always had very high standards. This Chaos Divine Feather might be an extraordinary object in Zhang Ziba's eyes, but in Wang Ling's eyes, it was just a strengthening material that could be discarded. The truth was that Wang Ling was very serious. The value of this chaotic divine feather wasn't even as high as the corpse wrapping painting. Although the chaos in the corpse wrapping painting was not as concentrated as the Chaos Divine Feather, it was still a painting that had been passed down for thousands of years. In addition, there was a big shot like Zhang Zijin in the painting. With this map, Wang Ling could learn about cultivation secrets in the universe at any time that he didn't understand. These ancient experts whom Dao ancestor Wang had suppressed in the corpse picture back then were now Wang Ling's greatest repository of knowledge, and could be called a portable encyclopedia. Of course, the most important thing was, this corpse picture was under Wang Ling's control, so he wouldn't do anything unnecessary on his own. Just like the iPad book of Sage Immortal that he had already sent away. After passing the second test, the swamp area, he continued on his way. The small world in the third room was completely different from the previous two rooms. It wasn't as eerie and terrifying as the withered forest, nor did it have the mysterious aura of the swamp. This was a world filled with white mist. All kinds of multicolored lights were surging within the primal chaos. The misty world was full of danger. As Wang Ling drew closer, he could clearly sense that the multicolored light here was different. It was very heavy on his shoulders, a weight that ordinary cultivators would find hard to bear. But Wang Ling walked through the fog as if it were flat ground. His footsteps were so brisk that Zhang Zipi, who was in the corpse wrapping painting, kept calling him freak in his heart. This freak didn't mean anything else, he just felt that Wang Ling's strength was too heaven-defying, and couldn't help exclaiming in his heart. Walking through the mist, Wang Ling felt like he was watching an old movie, as if he had lived through several eras. Countless creatures that had gone extinct in the universe appeared before his eyes. He saw a girl riding a white jade qilin and an old man fishing for a void dragon with a straight hook. All sorts of miraculous scenes appeared before his eyes. This was not an illusion, but a real scene. Wang Ling's king's eye had the ability to separate the false from the real. If it was fake, these scenes would immediately split apart. Zhang Zipi watched the entire process with Wang Ling. He was dumbstruck and speechless. The scene in front of him was so strange that he didn't know what words to use to describe it. Mirror of reality and illusion. After a long while, he said these 4 words skeptically. Zhang Zipi remembered reading about it in Dao ancestor Wang's notes. There was this kind of miraculous secret land in the universe, which was constructed from the nomological laws of an almighty. Everything here had the effect of a cosmic photo album. All kinds of classic images from the development of the multiverse would be preserved, and then constantly played them in the secret land. These images looked like images, but were in fact visible and tangible. They were no different from real scenes. When the false becomes the real becomes the fake. Outer God Sothith could easily create this world of reality and illusion, Zhang Zipei said. Sothith was known as the omniscient and omniscient of the outer gods. He was proficient in the network of the universe, and could be said to be omniscient and knowledgeable about every inch of the universe. It wasn't difficult for such an unfathomable realm to create this mirror of reality and illusion. However, these seemingly beautiful scenes always made Zhang Zipei feel a little unreal. The outer gods had always regarded human cultivators as fodder, and were extremely hostile to them. If this mirror of reality and illusion had really been created by Sothith, it should have recorded scenes of the glorious days when the great old ones had dominated the universe in the past, and sure enough. In the next second, as Zhang Zipei was feeling doubtful, the scene in front of him instantly changed. The smiling girl who had been riding on the white jade qilin, suddenly, the qilin she was sitting on turned around and bit her. The little girl screamed as the berserk white jade qilin directly bit her neck and crushed her head like a watermelon. It turned out that the great old ones had already implanted a type of parasitic spore under the qilin's curly hair. Nourished by the qilin's blood, the spore grew rapidly and gave birth to invisible tentacles that controlled the qilin to bite its owner to death. Then, these tentacles continued to devour the qilin until they finally became brand new, great old ones, with the help of the white jade qilin's body. As for the old man who had been fishing with a straight hook, he was in the same miserable state as the little girl. Yaw! Wang Yuan was a little nervous and couldn't help wrapping her arms around Wang Ling's neck. Wang Ling stretched out a hand and gently patted Wang Yuan on the back. The scene in front of them had indeed changed startlingly. It had been a harmonious scene just now, but in the blink of an eye, it had changed. I knew it would be like this. Zhang Zipei sighed. But the scene in front of him reminded Zhang Zipei of something else recorded in Dao Ancestor Wang's notes. This was just Dao Ancestor Wang's deduction, but after seeing the scene in front of him, Zhang Zipei felt that it made a lot of sense. Dao Ancestor Wang's deduction said, "It's very likely that the origin of humanity was a game played by the Great Old Ones." The era of the ancient universe, which was the era when the Great Old Ones ruled the universe, was far before human cultivators. Thus, it was reasonable to say that it was impossible for the Great Old Ones and human cultivators to coexist. But the mirror of reality and illusion in front of them clearly recorded the scene of the Great Old Ones possessing those humans. The most likely answer was that in order to expand their race, the Great Old Ones had used the power of nomological laws to build a new world of living beings. And these new living beings were humans. From God's perspective, they manipulated human cultivators and used them as their nourishment, which they continued to devour, until one day, the Great Old Ones were destroyed for some unknown reason. And those fodder who were still alive turned over and became the new masters of the universe. Of course, this was just Dao Ancestor Wang's own deduction. Even Zhang Zipei didn't have any more evidence to support this. Boring. Wang Ling gave a rare evaluation of Zhang Zipei's thoughts. Zhang Zipei said, "This is just a deduction. You know, old people like us are all conspiracy theorists." Dao Ancestor Wang's words might not be completely correct. Wang Ling sighed. He clenched his fists, deep in thought. Perhaps in the entire universe, human civilization was so insignificant that it was just a drop in the ocean. Naturally, it couldn't be the most advanced civilization, and there was still a lot to be improved on. However, the emergence of the human cultivator civilization definitely wasn't a subsidiary of another evil old civilization. Was it actually using this mirror of reality and illusion to slander human civilization? Crispy noodle snacks were clearly so delicious. At that moment, Wang Ling was in the third level of the mirror of reality. A prompt appeared in the air again. The golden text indicated that Wang Ling needed to appraise his strength for this level, and he needed at least 3 plus infinity S to pass. But Wang Ling already felt that he was a little impatient with this game. 3 plus infinity S. At that moment, Wang Ling frowned. Then, he rolled up the sleeve of his right hand. When Zhang Zipei saw this, he instantly panicked. What are you doing? Wang Ling flashed his fist, which was the size of a sandbag. What was he doing? Of course it was to overturn this outer god palace. Chapter 1593. Wang Ling rolled up his sleeves and put on an expression as if he was ready to go all out. Zhang Zipei's first reaction was naturally astonishment. Even though his understanding of Wang Ling's strength had been refreshed not long ago. But he didn't think that Wang Ling could deal with the entire outer god palace with one punch. But now, seeing Wang Ling flick up his sleeve, Zhang Zipei deeply realized that he had still underestimated Wang Ling a little. Why would such a terrifying young man exist in this universe? When Zhang Zizai had seen Wang Ling's king's eye earlier, he had actually guessed it. This was because he could see that the king's eye was not part of the Tao and could not be replicated by the great Tao. Therefore, the first thing that came to Zhang Zipei's mind was, products of the past. If the king's eye was related to the great old ones of the ancient universe era, in that case, everything would make sense. After coming to this conclusion, Zhang Zizi had initially suspected that Wang Ling wasn't a normal human cultivator. He felt that there was an 80 to 90% chance that Wang Ling had the bloodline of the old rulers of the ancient universe. But now, Zhang Zike felt that his conclusion was completely wrong. Although there were wars and the law of the jungle among the great old ones. However, a place like the outer deity palace symbolized the supreme authority of royalty. It was a symbolic product that represented the glory of the ancient cosmic civilization of the old dominators, just like the feng shui dragon vein that the ancient human cultivators believed in when they established the empire. No matter how much they fought, nobody would attack such a thing. This was an action that would destroy the very foundation of their faith and race. Before Wang Ling had called him out, he had already passed 2 tests in a row. Zhang Ziqin originally thought that it was because the king's eye might be a product of the past, which was why it was so smooth sailing in the outer god palace. But now, after seeing the bad attitude of the great old ones towards humans, this young man actually rose up and wanted to smash the entire outer god palace with a punch from the inside. Was it really possible? Zhang Ziqin was completely dumbfounded. On the other side, Wang Ling was also gathering his strength. He knew that it was not easy to disintegrate the outer deity's palace from the inside, so he had to pay special attention to the power of this punch. His usual attacks were rather casual. It was probably not enough to deal with the outer god palace. Admittedly, Wang Ling was also considering whether or not to remove the Tao talisman. He felt that he could reveal it, but there was no need. It was just destroying a house. It was not to the point where he had to unseal the talisman. At that moment, he took a deep breath. A few seconds later, golden light condensed on his fist. Countless strands of chaotic force gathered at the center of his fist like a whirlpool. In an instant, the surrounding space boiled. The real fog produced by the mirror of illusion was dispersed by the golden light that the youth condensed. At the eye of the fist, Zhang Zi could clearly feel that the concentration of chaos was soaring. Chaos was originally purplish-black in color. Only when the density reached a certain limit would it turn golden. It can actually reach this stage. Zhang Zibo was completely shocked. Who would have thought that the primordial chaos that Wang Ling had condensed at this moment would already far surpass that of Tao ancestor Wang back then? In just a few seconds, the concentration of primal chaos had reached an astronomical figure. He was tens of thousands of times more terrifying than Tao ancestor Wang of the past. Furthermore, this was only the beginning. He still hadn't reached his limit. Clang! A melodious bell rang out. It wasn't the voice of the outer divine palace, but a powerful fluctuation coming from the center of the universe, which resonated with Wang Ling in that moment. This time, it wasn't just Zhang Ziba. The other ancient powerhouses in the Supreme Corpse wrapping painting couldn't sit still either. They stared at the scene in front of them, stunned and pale. A faint golden silhouette appeared behind the youth, supreme and supreme. A golden magic ring above its head, and golden primal chaos fog at its feet. It was just an indistinct silhouette, but the minds of countless ancient powerhouses in the Supreme Corpse wrapping painting short-circuited for a brief moment, because they knew what on earth this thing that looked like a substitute behind Wang Ling was. This is a Dharma. This youth's Dharma is actually the spirit of the universe. Inside the Supreme Corpse wrapping painting, many of the ancient powerhouses couldn't help kneeling. It wasn't that they wanted to kneel, but that it was a natural reaction from their bodies when they saw the spirit of the universe. This was the most powerful Dharma object. It symbolized a kind of supreme, noble, and inexhaustible power. Clang! Just as everyone was in a daze, the bell rang out a second time. This was the fluctuation that followed the appearance of the spirit of the universe. It sounded like a bell, but was in fact the result of powerful energy spreading through the universe. If the universe was a zither, then all the planets in the universe were the strings. Wang Ling's spirit of the universe was the person plucking the strings. When the bell rang for the third time, an even greater fluctuation spread out, and the surrounding space and time were thrown into chaos. The sound of the bell was like a countdown that reverberated through the universe. It was a sign that something big was about to happen. This is the death knell of adjudication. Zhang Ziba was quite surprised. This was because he had learned about the judgment knell from Dao Ancestor Wang's notebook. Back then, Dao Ancestor Wang had tried to summon the spirit of his Dharma with tremendous power to produce fluctuations and activate the death knell of adjudication. But in the end, Dao Ancestor Wang had failed. Who knew that this scene would actually happen here? Death knell of adjudication. What's that? Someone in the Supreme Corpse wrapping painting asked. Not all 10,000 ancient powerhouses had Zhang Zidan's experience and knowledge. That's a verdict from the universe. It represents the will of primal chaos. Zhang Ziba explained. In fact, he couldn't say for sure what it was. But every time the death knell of adjudication rang out, it would give people an indescribable feeling of palpitation. It was as if the universe was about to collapse. All the fear, shock, and bewilderment added together took Wang Ling just a few short seconds to build up his strength. While he was building up his strength, the nomological laws of Outer God's palace noticed that something was wrong, and tried to condense a stream of primal chaos to destroy Wang Ling with the power of Outer God's order, but the stream was swallowed up by the spirit of the universe. At that moment, this illusory silhouette manifested its supreme position. It's here. When Wang Ling opened his eyes, a devastating fist light shot out from his hand. Boom! A huge penetrating beam of light shot out from his fist and pointed straight at the void in front of him. This was a kind of power condensed from the center of the universe, and everything in its path collapsed. The space of the mirror of illusion shattered on the spot, and the fog was purified by the golden light. As the death knell of adjudication rang out for the fifth time, everything in its path was destroyed and collapsed. Chapter 1594. Zhang Zek stared dumbstruck at the scene in front of him. The Outer God Palace shook and everything seemed to be on the verge of collapse. Then, he heard the sound of something cracking inside the palace, as if something was about to collapse. One punch and the Outer God Palace collapsed. Inside the Supreme Corpse winding up painting, all the ancient powerhouses turned pale with shock. Who would have thought that such an invincible youngster would appear after all these ages? The Outer God Palace, that was the ancient space civilization, the symbol of the highest power among the great old ones, it was also the symbol of hegemony. No one had expected the Outer God Palace to collapse with one punch from Wang Ling, as brittle as a piece of tofu. The supreme nomological laws of the outer god were so powerful that they crisscrossed the palace like an electric net and could punish everything that dared to disrespect them. But in front of Wang Ling, these nomological laws were useless. The broken outer god palace was no longer calm. Boom! Thousands of pitch-black tentacles emitted blazing chaotic light as they seeped in through the cracks in the outer god palace. The form collapsed, but the spirit didn't die. Before the outer god palace completely disintegrated, it gathered the last of its godly power for a counterattack. After all, it was something from the ancient universe era, and Wang Ling had actually expected this level of toughness. Wang Ling's expression was as still as an ancient well. Because this was already the best he could do. At that moment, the outer god palace was completely dark, giving Wang Ling the illusion that he was in the dark. In this moment of absolute darkness, these thousands of thick tentacles swiftly stretched out in all directions with the terrifying power of godly punishment. Wang Ling raised his hand and caught a few of the tentacles that were lashing at his face. Then, he pulled them out and roasted them before feeding them to little girl Nuan, who was starving on his shoulder. The hunter of the end's tentacles weren't delicious, but Wang Ling judged that the flesh of these tentacles, which had the effect of godly punishment, would definitely be very good. They weren't on the same level in terms of power alone. Thus, the meat would definitely be high in protein and very chewy. Of course, the most important thing was that the moment these tentacles lashed at him, Wang Ling could sense the aura of the sea. He judged that these were probably the godly punishment tentacles that the outer god palace had split from the sea of consciousness with the last of its will. To put it bluntly, the sea of consciousness was also a sea. Since it was seafood from the sea, it definitely tasted salty. In fact, Nuan was starving. Even if the tentacles didn't taste salty, she could still eat them. But now that it had a flavor, it was naturally the icing on the cake. Most importantly, she realized that her brother did not lie to her. The god's punishment tentacles were really delicious. It was many times chewier than the tentacles of the final hunter. Little girl Nuan couldn't describe the texture, but after Wang Ling tasted it after roasting it, it felt a little like squid noodles. It was the kind of scene that appeared in gourmet anime, where the chewy cuttlefish minced meat was stuffed into the noodles to increase the chewiness and texture. It had to be said that the soft and chewy texture of the divine punishment tentacles was indeed addictive. At this moment, the ancient powerhouses in the corpse picture were once again stupefied by Wang Ling and Wang Nuan's actions. This pair of brother and sister was too terrifying. Speaking of which, they were all born on Earth, but they didn't seem like Earthlings at all. Even the outer deity palace's divine punishment stripe was not spared. In fact, it wasn't just the ancient experts in the painting that were confused. The divine punishment tentacles that had attacked Wang Ling and Wang Nuan were also a little confused. When the Wang siblings began to swallow the tentacles into their stomachs, in this darkest moment, all the restless creatures in the surroundings instantly quietened down. The divine punishment tentacles were stupefied. They had just evolved to punish Wang Ling with the outer deity's will, but in the end, Wang Ling had directly grabbed their tentacles, directly cut them off, roasted them, and eaten them. This was done so skillfully that no one could understand it at all. For a moment, all the divine punishment tentacles stopped what they were doing and fell into a temporary daze. They were the divine punishment tentacles. They represented the will of the outer deities. Could it be that they didn't care about face? There was no doubt that Wang Ling's behavior was full of provocation. He was tarnishing the last of the divine punishment will of the outer deity palace, and practically didn't give them any leeway at all. After more than 10 seconds of dead silence, little girl Nuan, who was addicted to eating, no longer maintained her image as an obedient baby, and began to gorge herself. One in her left hand and one in her right hand, the sound of her chewing sounded like the echo of a demon. At this point, the outer deity palace began to riot again. Who would have thought that a newborn baby girl would be so arrogant? They couldn't deal with Wang Ling, but it seemed that they could use this baby as an example. Thus, even more divine punishment tentacles, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, surged out of the crack and split into two groups to attack Wang Ling and Wang Yuan. At that moment, a shocking scene appeared. Little girl Yuan, who was happily eating the divine punishment tentacles, actually grew rapidly in a short period of time. Wang Ling had actually noticed this when he had eaten the Hunter of the End's tentacle outside the outer deity palace earlier. At first, he thought it was an illusion, but now it seemed that he hadn't seen it wrong. Little girl Yuan's body was indeed growing bigger. But it wasn't the kind of growth that was possible, it was merely a doubling of her current body size. In less than a minute, little girl Yuan's infinitely strong body had actually grown to more than 100 feet tall. She was still lying on the ground like a baby, and the milky scent of her body instantly filled the entire space before it flowed out of the crack in the outer deity palace. Is there too much energy? Zhang Zizai was dumbfounded. Wang Ling very quickly realized what was going on in front of him. Although little girl Yuan looked no different from a real person, she was essentially the incarnation of little girl Yuan's shadow. Shadows could expand infinitely to begin with. When they absorbed too much energy, their bodies would naturally expand infinitely. Outside the outer deity palace, the grave god had already sensed something strange in the palace. He had actually thought that an outer deity palace might not be able to trap Wang Ling. His initial goal had been to delay Wang Ling so that he would have enough time to complete the final resurrection step. But the grave god hadn't expected this pair of siblings to break out so quickly. What was even more unexpected was that at that moment, he actually saw an enormous baby's chubby little hand directly pierce through the outer deity palace with a rumble and stretch out from the top. The grave god, who was inheriting the power of outer deity Sothatha's bloodline, was utterly astonished. Chapter 1595. No one would have thought that it would actually be a pair of giant baby hands that had finally broken through the outer god palace. Little girl Yuan's current combat strength was extremely terrifying. She had absorbed a lot of the power of the divine punishment tentacles, causing her body to be full of energy. It was only then that Wang Ling realized how terrifying the younger sister of the founder of Shadow Dao's Shadow Dao absorption ability was. She was so familiar with this operation that it was as if she had practiced it countless times in her mother's womb. It could only be said that little girl Yuan was a genuine genius who knew how to fight. Of course, even though Wang Yuan's body had expanded to this extent, the truth was that Shadow Dao's absorption ability was even more terrifying than that of a black hole, and this little bit of energy was actually far from enough to reach saturation. But an outer god palace clearly wasn't enough for little girl Yuan to digest. The tens of thousands of divine punishment tentacles in the outer god palace had been full of confidence at first, but in the end, they were utterly shocked by little girl Yuan's ferocious operation. How can there be such a ferocious child in this world? This was what a lot of people thought. A lot of people wanted to define Wang Yuan as a brat, but felt that this label wasn't appropriate. That was because while it seemed like the little girl was gorging herself on the divine punishment tentacles, this was essentially an act of saving all of humanity and even the entire universe. Who else in this world would be born with a weak and hungry baby body to resist the overlord of the universe who had the bloodline of the Great Old One? Perfected Yuan. What a profound sense of righteousness. How could she be described as a derogatory label like brat? She was clearly a heroine of the present age. The queen of baby girls. It wasn't just the powerhouses in the Supreme Corp's shrouding painting who were shocked. In fact, Wang Yuan's existence had indeed exceeded the scope of the laws of the outer god palace. It wasn't just the powerhouses in the painting who were watching this scene, anyone who saw it would find it hard to understand. When the collapsing palace was finally broken through by Wang Yuan's huge fat hand after her multiplication, the grave goddess knew that the palace she had inherited from the outer god Sothath was completely beyond saving. At that moment, with the complete collapse of the outer god palace, all that was left in the supreme world was a pile of broken walls that looked like chicken feathers. Little girl Yuan was still chewing on the god's punishment tentacle in her hand. At this moment, she suddenly realized that one of the tentacles seemed to taste different from the one she had eaten before. Even with her strong teeth, she couldn't bite it at all. When the girl pulled out this particular tentacle, Wang Ling saw that it was actually connected to the three-petal golden lotus he had seen earlier. The golden lotus, which only had 3 petals, was on high alert. The petals were tightly shut, not leaving a single gap. Wang Ling was secretly astonished. He hadn't expected the golden lotus to actually survive unscathed after the outer god's palace had collapsed to such an extent. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have entered in the first place. He would have just punched the palace from the outside and collapsed it. It would have been much easier. When the strange 3-petal golden lotus appeared in the outer god palace, even the grave god was different. He had inherited the bloodline of the outer god, Sothith. He was the omniscient and omniscient god of the great old ones. He was omniscient in the universe. Logically speaking, since this 3-petal golden lotus had originally been in outer god Sothith's palace, it should have belonged to Sothith. But the grave god, who had already completed the resurrection and evolution ritual, had no recollection of this at all. What on earth was this? It could actually bypass the grave god's knowledge and hit Kendra in his blind spot. At that moment, the supreme world was once again plunged into the endless chaos of the great old ones. Needless to say, a battle for this strange 3-petal golden lotus had broken out at that moment. The grave god had wanted to settle the grudge between him and Wang Ling as soon as possible, but he hadn't expected such a small interlude. He didn't know what this 3-petal golden lotus was, but since it was in the outer god palace and had crossed his blind spot, it had to be something extremely important. Most importantly, the grave god could sense that the youngster in front of him was also very interested in this thing. As his biggest enemy, he naturally couldn't let Wang Ling have his way so easily. After completing the resurrection and evolution ritual, the grave god's body was so huge that it looked like a series of bubbles from afar. Outer god Sothith had the nickname Bubble God to begin with. Of course, it was also a little like grapes. This description wasn't very serious, but in little girl Nwan's eyes, it was a string of food. There was a hum. An extremely small human figure condensed from this huge string of bubbles, which didn't have a lower body. The upper body looked exactly like Ping Shiren's body, except that it was covered in the marks of the great old ones, which made it look even more sinister and sinister than before. In the next second, the grave god, who had already inherited the complete bloodline of the outer gods, was the first to attack. The nearby space shook along with the grave god's will, as if everything was collapsing and being destroyed. Then, from his incomparably huge body, a huge spherical crystalline object sealed with dark light was separated, containing astonishing energy. Lifeless and formless, all things perish, the grave god's murmur rang out and echoed in the supreme world. Wang Ling instinctively sensed a hint of danger. This sphere looked like a bubble, but the dense spirit power inside was extremely real. Even though Wang Yuan had swelled up to this extent after swallowing so much energy, if this sphere exploded in front of her, perhaps, a few strands of hair would be burned off, right? Wang Ling pondered how to prevent his little sister from getting hurt. It was just that this sphere was too big and had too wide an area of effect. It was almost a suicidal attack, and the core energy fluctuations it would cause would cover the entire supreme world. But the grave god was now an outer god, and he could control both the power of space and time, so he wasn't afraid of death at all. At that moment, he sent this bubble magic sphere flying toward Wang Yuan, which was actually a form of intimidation and coercion. He wanted little girl Yuan in front of him to back off and stop clinging to the 3-petal golden lotus. Although he hadn't inherited any memories of this 3-petal golden lotus, the grave god already had a guess as to what it was. That made sense. Apart from the mandate of heaven, this might be another mysterious object. With this in mind, the grave god had already made up his mind that he absolutely wouldn't let Wang Ling get this golden lotus. However, the grave god hadn't expected that his attempt to intimidate Wang Yuan wouldn't work at all. This little girl was very bold. She directly slapped the sphere with her palm. This was an ancestral slap that could be said to be passed down from generation to generation. Instructor, Wang Ling. Chapter 1596. The Nirvana magic ball produced by the grave gods, no life, no shape, all things die, move was extremely lethal. From a distance, it looked like a giant bubble, but its destructive power was self-evident. After all, there weren't many spells in the world that could burn off the siblings' hair. It was clear that the grave god hadn't shown the slightest bit of mercy, which instead proved the importance of this golden lotus. The truth was that Wang Ling didn't know what it was. At first, he had only thought that the golden light it emitted could counteract the vision of his king's eye. This had piqued his curiosity, which was why he was determined to get his hands on the golden lotus. On the other side, the grave god actually didn't know what this golden lotus was either. He just felt that the siblings in front of him were desperate to get it. Naturally, he couldn't let them get it so easily. In the Supreme Corpse wrapping painting, Zhang Ziba and the other ancient powerhouses were already speechless as they watched the battle unfold in front of them. This was mainly because they were horrified by the world-destroying battle in front of them. Of course, no one would have thought that the main point of this cosmic war was actually a three-petal golden lotus that no one knew about. In any case, it was the main focus. No one wanted the other party to succeed in their goal. When little girl Nwan used the old Wang family's ancestral skill to slap the grave god's Nirvana magic ball, there was a huge soundless explosion in the supreme world in an instant. Boiling heat and intense spirit power rolled up along with the explosion of the magic ball, directly covering the entire supreme world. The power of the explosion was astonishing, and so was the volume of the explosion, which was almost inaudible. Thus, this destruction was completely soundless. The terrifying power caused the sky to crack and the earth to sink. Many living beings in the universe that were extremely far away from the supreme world felt this peculiar fluctuation. They either felt uneasy on the planets they were on, or they roared out directly. For a moment, an endless storm was stirred up. Such a scene was simply inconceivable, and it was like the beginning of the world. Zhang Ziba and the ancient powerhouses were flabbergasted. Even the battle between Dao ancestors Wang back then hadn't reached this level. When the dust in the sky dispersed, little girl Nwan's huge body was still at the front, but she did not seem to have suffered any injuries at all. Under such a huge explosion, there was only a layer of ash on his face. It was unimaginably strong. So here's the key question. They all understood this logic. But what exactly was this three-petal golden lotus? Inside the Supreme Corpse painting, the ancient powerhouses looked at each other in dismay. They had already turned into a pile of white skeletons, but now they had become Wang Ling's portable encyclopedia and think tank, all of them making guesses and coming up with ideas. After such a long period of time, many people no longer held any hope of killing their way out of the corpse wrapping painting. But now, Wang Ling's appearance seemed to have a halo of its own. This young man, who was shining with a bright light, gave hope and courage to these ancient experts who had been silent in the corpse wrapping painting for a long time. This pair of brother and sister were too strong. As long as he fawned over one of them, it wouldn't be difficult to rescue them from the map and conveniently perform the impure earth reincarnation. Could it be another mysterious object? Someone in the corpse wrapping painting guessed. But it was quickly rejected. Another mysterious object? I don't think so. The most likely outcome of that mysterious object called destiny is a fragment of outer god Sothitha's heart. And this grave god only inherited Sothitha's bloodline power after obtaining a little of it. If this three-petal golden lotus is a mysterious object, it's impossible that he didn't sense it at all. He was a little hesitant when he made his move earlier. He didn't know what to do, as if he didn't know the three-petal golden lotus existed at all. Then what on earth is it? I don't know if you've heard of cosmic freak. At that moment, someone suddenly mentioned a new term. Most of the primordial immemorial era's experts were at a loss about this matter. Only Zhang Zidong seemed to have thought of something. He stared at the skeleton in front of him and frowned deeply. "Your Excellency, your voice is very familiar. I am Star Wanderer Li Xian." Li Xian. At the mention of his name, Zhang Zidong had already recalled the skeleton's face when it was alive. Back then, Li Xian had the nickname Star Wanderer mainly because of his rich adventure experience. Because of his rich experience, many people would ask Li Xian to go with them when they went to the secret realm. Over time, he had this nickname. Speaking of which, Li Xian was also an old acquaintance of his. Because he always went to the arcane realm, he had a lot of treasures at home. Many of them were lost, but they were actually stolen by Zhang Zidong. "Your Excellency, do you know me?" Li Xian asked with a smile. "No. I'm not familiar with you." Zhang Zidong shook his head. After all, he had gone to Li Xian's house to steal things and was afraid of being reminded of the past, so he denied knowing Li Xian. But in fact, Li Xian actually knew Zhang Zidong. Because when the old god and Zhang Zidong were having an illicit affair, Li Xian was under their bed, but Zhang Zidong was caught first. Li Xian came in after him, and there was a period of time in between. So until now, no one knew the real reason why this Star Wanderer, with an excellent reputation, had come in. Speaking of which, Li Xian actually felt quite wronged when he was caught. Because back then, he had only met the old god to compose poems. The old god wasn't his cup of tea at all. But for some reason, when he heard that someone was looking for the old god outside the door, Li Xian felt as nervous as a thief, and directly hid under the bed, and then, there was no then. When Dao ancestor Wang had caught Li Xian had smiled and claimed that he and the old god had just been composing poems. But it was clear that this was the reason. Dao ancestor Wang hadn't acknowledged it. Inside the picture of the corpse, the mental struggle between the ancient powerhouses was very exciting. On the other side, thanks to Li Xian and Zhang Zidong, Wang Ling also learned about the universe ghost fetus. According to Dao ancestor Wang's notes, the legendary universe ghost fetus was an eye of nature at the center of the universe, and had the power to see through all things in the universe. To put it bluntly, this was an insight that only appeared in legends. It was an existence that was unique in the universe. Even if Wang Ling didn't want it, he couldn't give it to the evil god in front of him for free. And so, in the next second, in the second round, Wang Ling made the first move. Frowning slightly, he spread his fingers and directly reached out to grab the grave god's body. His giant hand directly sank into this huge bunch of grapes and stirred it violently. Chapter 1597. The grave god didn't expect Wang Ling to be so bold as to directly plunge his hands into his huge body and stir them up. In a split second, the grave god felt as if a sea of clouds was churning inside his body, as if the sky and earth were being turned upside down. There was a long cry, like a horn from the abyss, coming from the grave god's body and reaching very far away. This was the sound of air waves rushing out of the cracks after time and space had been completely disrupted. It was truly a landslide, a tsunami, and a galaxy. Wang Ling found that his hand was sucked in by the power inside the grave god's body, as if countless tentacles were seeping out of the cracks in his body to entangle his hand and then spread to his entire arm. These tentacles were trying to drag Wang Ling inside, as if to devour him. "Kid, you're too reckless," the grave god said in a low voice at that moment. He had already inherited the bloodline of outer god Sothith, so he wasn't afraid of Wang Ling's attack at all. After all, the grave god had mastered the supreme laws of time and space, and in fact already had battle strength that surpassed the universe level. No matter how heaven-defying Wang Ling was, there was no way he could defeat the grave god in his area of expertise. Even if the grave god died at that moment, he could rewind time to a second before he died. Thus, he had already become an immortal existence, and no one else in the universe was qualified to be his opponent. But Wang Ling's boldness once again exceeded the grave god's expectations. Even though the youngster seemed to be at a disadvantage, his expression didn't change much. He didn't even resist, and directly burrowed into the grave god's body through these tentacles. The grave god sensed something strange about this move, and instantly felt that he had been a little careless. Given Wang Ling's abilities, he would never have done something so rash if he hadn't been so confident in his next move. The grave god believed that he didn't have a life gate. That was because he had hidden his outer god's heart inside his body. Inside his body, space and time intertwined in a complex manner, and the outer god's heart changed position every minute and second as it moved through countless spaces and time. Even if Wang Ling wanted to go in, it wouldn't be so easy for him to attack the grave god's heart. He controlled time, space, as well as his own life gate, the heart of the outer god. Given that the heart of the outer god was constantly changing positions, Wang Ling trying to search his body was undoubtedly like looking for a needle in a haystack. As a true Undying, the grave god shouldn't have been worried about Wang Ling's actions. But at that moment, Wang Ling's bold behavior made him wonder if his outer god's heart had really been discovered. In the end, a shocking scene unfolded. The young man who had burrowed into the grave god's huge bunch of grapes took out a red, round object the size of a grain of rice. The heart of the outer god. He actually found it. Countless people in the corpse-wrapping picture applauded. Zhang Zizi stared at the scene with his eyes wide open, feeling incredulous. It could only be said that Wang Ling was too strong. How did you do it? Although the grave god has gained control of Sothatha's abilities and has the power to control time and space. But if someone else has the same level of power, I'm afraid it will cancel each other out, like two extremes. At that moment, Star Traveler Li Xian said, although the power of the outer god transcends Tao, the truth of all things in the world can still be found. As soon as Li Xian said this, everyone thought that the outcome of this battle had already been decided. No one thought that in the face of such a powerful outer god, Wang Ling would actually be so precise. Without the slightest extra movement, he directly found the heart of the outer god, which was like a grain of sand, in the countless crisscrossing space and time. And now, he was only one step away from victory. Wang Ling just needed to crush the heart of the outer god, and the grave god would undoubtedly die. Not good. But on the other side, the grave god reacted very quickly. Before Wang Ling crushed the heart of the outer god, he had forcibly activated the backtrack ability to turn back time to before Wang Ling had grabbed the heart of the outer god. The scene had returned to a few minutes ago. The young man in front of him frowned slightly, spread open his fingers, and directly reached into the grave god's body. The giant hand directly sank into this huge bunch of grapes and stirred violently. This scene looked very familiar, but this time, the grave god didn't intend to drag Wang Ling away. Instead, he used all the strength in his body to force Wang Ling's hand out of his body. He thought that by doing so, he could stop Wang Ling from taking out the heart of the outer god. But the next second, Wang Ling came out with the grave god's heart again. The heart of the outer god, he actually found it. Countless people in the picture of the corpse wrapping themselves up clapped and cheered. Zhang Zipei's eyes widened again as he watched this scene, feeling incredulous in his heart. It could only be said that Wang Ling was too strong. However, the people in the painting all had an inexplicable illusion. That was because they felt as if they had seen this scene somewhere before. It wasn't until the same scene had happened more than 20 times that the ancient powerhouses in the picture of the corpse wrapping began to have some doubts. Why do I feel like this isn't the first time I've seen this scene? Do you think so too? I also feel like I've seen this scene in my dreams before. It's probably time going back. At that moment, the experienced and knowledgeable Li Xian made another judgment. Ling Zhenren has repeatedly pulled out the heart of the outer god of the evil god, and the evil god is constantly resisting through its ability to turn back time. But it doesn't seem to have any effect. It's useless. Zhang Zipei shook his head and said, "This is an infinite cycle of death and reincarnation. No matter how you resist, the result will be the same. It's just that the method of pulling out the heart may change." They had thought that Wang Ling and the grave god had equal power to balance time and space. Now, Zhang Zipei and Li Xian realized that they had been wrong in the end, and very wrong at that. Wang Ling's operation was clearly at the 5th level. The grave god had already sensed that he had been tricked the first time he had taken out the heart of the outer god. Because that was also the first time Wang Ling had entered the grave god's body. This man had used his own power to directly control all the dimensions of time and space in the universe. At every possible point in time, he had found the grave god's heart of the outer god and taken it away. That was probably the result of countless clones working together. In other words, no matter how the grave god turned back time, it was useless. Because strictly speaking, he was already dead. In every different dimension of time and space. They had all been killed by Wang Ling once. Chapter 1598. When the grave god carved the 50th positive character in his spiritual world, Wang Ling had already dug out his heart 50 times. The grave god didn't know what was wrong with him. Why had he failed 50 times in a row, and why had his heart been dug out by Wang Ling each time from the countless timelines he controlled? When this pair of frightening dead fish eyes appeared in front of the grave god 51st time, he was already traumatized. Before Wang Ling could even take out his outer god heart, the grave god directly activated his time reversal ability. The grave god roared at Wang Ling, "I am Sothith, the supreme outer god who controls space and time. Don't even think about killing me like this." Facing Wang Ling, he adjusted time again. As long as the grave god didn't dig out his heart, he wouldn't be considered dead. Wang Ling finally understood this point. But to be honest, no matter how the grave god tried to escape, his fate was already set in stone and couldn't be changed. This was an ability even more terrifying than a seal. It trapped a person in an infinite cycle of death and reincarnation, forcing them to face the same fate over and over again. In some sense, Wang Ling felt that the grave god's fate was even more miserable than Bai Zhe's. Although Wang Ling had eliminated Bai Zhe from all the timelines and there was no longer anyone named Bai Zhe in the universe, at least Bai Zhe could die happily. At least Bai Zhe didn't have to bear this kind of inescapable pain. But no matter what the grave god did now, his fate was already set in stone. The reason why he had chosen this method was actually after careful consideration. 1. The grave god had already inherited the outer god bloodline, and there were many strange resurrection methods among the creatures of this ancient universe. Wang Ling was worried that after killing him, he would evolve toward his 3rd or even 4th form, which would be a little endless. 2. Who told the grave god to hit Wang Wan? This Nirvana magic ball had burned off a few strands of his sister's hair. This debt had to be settled. When Wang Ling returned to the correct world and timeline, the grave god in front of him had already disappeared. The reason was that the grave god had used his time reversal ability to bring his timeline back to the past. However, Wang Ling agreed that he had the ability to control time. Thus, the current situation was that the grave god was trapped in his old timeline, and couldn't come out, because once he did, Wang Ling would crush his outer god heart. As for Wang Ling, he continued to move forward. No one in the corpse picture had expected the battle between Wang Ling and the grave god to end so decisively. Including Zhang Ziba, Li Xian and many other ancient warriors, they all believed that this would be a pinnacle battle that would be recorded in history. But no one expected that when Wang Ling got serious, the grave god, who had already evolved into an outer god, would still be instantly killed, as the grave goddess was trapped in the old timeline. Wrapped in a 3-petal golden lotus, the universe ghost embryo fell into Wang Ling's hands. Wang Ling stretched out his hand and pulled the flower bud of the cosmic egg into his palm. Seeing this, Nguyen couldn't help sucking her finger. She knew that the flower bud was extremely important to Wang Ling, otherwise she really wouldn't have been able to resist the urge to eat it. In the end, the little girl just stretched out her finger and gently poked the bud. Then, there was a buzzing sound. The universe bone fetus gave off a brilliant light, and Wang Ling frowned slightly when he realized that it was absorbing the excess energy in on Wan's body. Beautiful book. This little girl had eaten too many deity punishment tentacles, which had resulted in her current size doubling. Now that the universe bone fetus had absorbed her energy, she was once again restrained. In the end, little girl Wan returned to her original size and lay on Wang Ling's shoulder again. She then yawned, and with a puff, she turned into a cloud of smoke and disappeared. Has she returned to her original body? Wang Ling thought with a faint smile on his face. After all, she was just born. She must be tired after going through such battles one after another. Zhang Ziba couldn't help sighing. Looking at Wang Wan's adorable appearance, he sighed emotionally in his heart. He should have had more daughters back then. Daughters were cute, and they were from China Merchants Bank. Giving birth to a son was completely useless. It was because he had to raise so many sons that he had embarked on this path of no return. However, after being trapped in the shrouded corpse painting, Zhang Zidi felt the most regretful and apologetic towards his family members. He didn't know if his children, who had yet to grow up, survived after he was trapped in this painting. This was what Zhang Zibo wanted to know the most. Given Dao ancestor Wang's personality, he wouldn't go so far as to make a move on Wang Ling's family. Every grievance had its perpetrator, and every debt had its debtor. Dao ancestor Wang wouldn't be so ruthless. At that moment, Li Xian stared at the universe bone fetus in Wang Ling's hand and said, "I never thought that the universe bone fetus would really exist." These words pulled Zhang Ziba back from his thoughts. To make the universe bone fetus bloom, I'm afraid it'll need an enormous amount of energy. Also, it's obvious that this universe bone fetus has been frightened. Its flower bud is too tight, and it'll need some time to adapt. Listening to their analysis, Wang Ling nodded. Following Zhang Ziba's advice, he infused energy bit by bit, rather than all at once. He did indeed have such an enormous amount of energy. But for the universe bone fetus, energy was more like fertilizer or nutrient solution. It wouldn't do if he infused it too much. Thus, he could only be patient and wait for the flower bud to bloom before he saw what on earth this universe bone fetus was. On Sun Island, Wang Ling retracted his thoughts. On this side, the closed-door competition surrounding the high school student ranking list was still going on. No one could have imagined that this number 60 high school mascot, who had been sitting in the lounge and seemed to be daydreaming, had suddenly come back to his senses, had just saved the universe once again. In the old timeline, the grave god stared at the demonic youngster in front of him and couldn't help roaring angrily, Can't you *King do it another way? Can you stop digging out hearts?" He glared at Wang Ling and cursed. Without saying a word, Wang Ling dug out hearts like a black tiger. Until now, the grave god still hadn't figured out what on earth had happened, and mainly because he didn't have the guts to think about it. As a god who controlled time and space, he thought that he had everything under control. After all, Wang Ling was just an ordinary earthling. No matter how strong he was, there was no way that Wang Ling could surpass him in these two aspects. But the repeated endings and repeated deaths in front of him told the grave god a horrifying fact that he had no choice but to believe. He had actually been killed by Wang Ling in all the timelines and world lines. Chapter 1599. 1599th time. In the extra timeline, after the grave god recorded the number of times he had died, his body was already exhausted, and there was despair on his face. The fact that he couldn't escape his fate was a sign of his decline and end. No matter how he struggled, it was useless, which was the most frightening part. Preposterous, preposterous! The grave god roared. He was clearly the god who controlled time and space, but he was actually being played by an earthling. In a fit of anger, he moved the timeline forward again and changed the world he was in. This was a brand new world line. He firmly believed that as long as he made a different choice, he could definitely change his fate of having his heart dug out by Wang Ling through the butterfly effect. The grave god jumped back to the time when he had sent the ancient divine weapon to rescue Ping Shiren. According to that timeline, Ping Shiren's soul had been forcibly taken back to his residence by dusk, and the grave god had used Ping Shiren's body to cast a spell to open the heavenly tomb. If he hadn't done that back then, the outcome might have been different. So this time, the grave god didn't make a move. If he had chosen to continue hiding in star devouring. If he hadn't opened the heavenly tomb and hadn't inherited outer god Sothatha's bloodline, and had stayed here obediently, he might have been fine. But what the grave god didn't expect was that even in this world line, the teenager from Earth would still be able to find him very quickly. Despair flashed across the grave god's face. Then, without saying a word, Wang Ling directly dug out the grave god's heart. Even this timeline was under his control. When the grave god opened his eyes again, time had returned to the point when he had become an outer god. Just as he was about to make up his mind to jump again, a voice suddenly rang out in his head. "It's no use. You can't deal with him like this. I know all too well what he's capable of." It was a very young voice. To the grave god's utter astonishment, this voice actually rang out directly in his head. A direct mental intervention. What a joke. Even if he was being bullied by Wang Ling, since when could someone other than Wang Ling ride over his head? He tried to purify his mind and force out the voice in his head. However, the mysterious voice sneered. "You don't have to do this. If you don't want to cooperate, I can leave. But if we don't work together, the chances of us defeating him are almost zero." These words calmed the grave god down a little. He had been killed by Wang Ling so many times that his mind was in a mess, and he needed someone to guide him. In the face of the sudden voice, although he was furious, he also felt as if he had grasped onto a life-saving straw. "Who do you think you are? Someone who is in the same boat as you?" The voice laughed and said, "That person erased everything about me from the universe. But he didn't expect my will to transcend everything and survive with a powerful resentment, Udon. I have already become a transcendent existence. I don't need to rely on my physical body to survive. The divine of time, and. Grave god that the voice the god that the god, the tomb god, the voice, of the two." During the conversation, the grave god tried to find the source of the spiritual energy, but he found that the source was formless. His tracking signal was sent out through a strange path to the entire universe. "How about it? Do you want to cooperate?" Seeing that the grave goddess had not spoken for a long time, the voice continued to instigate, "I'll help you obtain the remaining mysterious items. Are you talking about the mandate of heaven?" The grave goddess asked doubtfully. "The portion you received did not allow you to completely inherit Sothatha's power. He's still a distance away from Sothatha's peak." The universe black fetus was a strange object that Wang Ling had never seen before. Natural magic treasures like this that could be bred for cultivation were actually very rare. Furthermore, he realized that the universe bone fetus seemed to be absorbing excess energy from his body. But Zhang Zidi and Li Xian both said that after the universe fetus matured, it would no longer have the ability to absorb excess energy. Thus, Wang Ling's plan to use the universe soul fetus to balance the excess energy in his body failed. He still had to wait for Wang Ming to develop a new Dao talisman seal using that strange black stone. But this was still a very special gain for Wang Ling. At the very least, while the universe soul fetus matured, there was finally something else to share the excess spirit power in his body with the original Dao talisman seal, thus helping Wang Ling to better control his power. Wang Ling put the universe soul fetus in his spiritual space, which provided it with a lot of nutrients. For the universe soul fetus, this was an excellent source of nutrients. After the universe soul fetus settled down in Wang Ling's spiritual space, which resembled another universe, it started to emit a golden ripple as it used its energy to probe the scope of this new universe. In the end, the universe soul fetus trembled slightly, because this space was too big, and there was practically no end to it. In reality, for the first time, a golden vertical line naturally appeared between Wang Ling's eyebrows. It looked like a mark between his sword-like eyebrows, which was at odds with his dead fish eyes. But the universe soul fetus was too mysterious, and ordinary people couldn't see this eye. Even Lotus Sun, who was known to be the #1 foundation establishment cultivator on Earth, couldn't see Wang Ling's eye. After all, the girl had relied on mysterious sea sword chi after becoming one with the sword, and wasn't her own realm. But Wang Ling felt that it was probably a good thing that Lotus Sun didn't know about this. The universe soul fetus was something that had appeared in the era of the ancient universe to begin with, and was related to those brutal rulers of the old days. It would probably be very dangerous to be associated with these evil things. I wonder what amazing changes this universe soul fetus will have when it's fully formed. This thing might not necessarily be anything good, and it's very difficult to control it. At the moment, I'm afraid that only someone at Ling Jinren's realm can steadily control it. Li Xian and Zhang Xique looked at each other. They were the only two people among the ancient experts who had heard about the universe soul fetus, and were also the most experienced. Wang Ling planned to put them in important positions later. On this side, when it was almost Wang Ling's turn to go on stage, he pinched his fingers together to calculate how the match would progress. Then, he frowned. Because it seemed that someone on the Zhugong family's side was still itching to make a move, and was trying to make a move on Lotus Sun, who was pretending to be Zhugong Yoshiko, in this match. Right now, Wang Ling just wanted to win the match and win the prize money, and couldn't care less about anything else. He felt that he could totally get these ancient experts in the corpse wrapping picture to do this kind of small thing for him. Thus, after Wang Ling conveyed the entire matter to Li Xian through his mind, Li Xian's eyes instantly lit up. Wang Ling wanted to give him the key to freely enter and exit the corpse wrapping picture. This was something that Li Xian had never expected. Like the other ancient experts, Li Xian had seen Wang Ling beat up the grave god with his own eyes. Since Wang Ling had given his order, he would naturally do whatever he could to carry it out. He immediately kowtowed. Rest assured, Ling Jinren. Leave this to me, and I'll definitely do it beautifully. On the other side, the people from the Zhugong family who had been plotting to deal with Zhugong Yoshiko also never expected this. The person who was coming to the Zhugong family was an ancient expert. And Li Xian wasn't doing anything superfluous on this trip. He had just been sent by Wang Ling to deal with the Zhugong family's affairs. Who could have thought that in the blink of an eye, an ancient expert from back then would become Wang Ling's new uncle? Chapter 1600. This was the first time Li Xian had been assigned a task by Wang Ling, and also the first time he had stepped out of the corpse wrapping picture since ancient times. But now, all the ancient experts in the picture were just skeletons. Rebuilding a physical body wasn't difficult for Wang Ling, but this was for an immemorial expert, so he planned to find some time to tailor a body specifically for the tool people he often used in the painting after he was done with the matter at hand. As for now, when Li Xian stepped out of the corpse wrapping picture, he still didn't have a body. In order to avoid people thinking that he was cosplaying as Ultimate King of Sin Domain, he used the power of the King's Eye to give Li Xian a skin. Li Xian looked at himself in the mirror after he stepped out. Although he wasn't used to his current attire, he was very receptive. Li Xian looked at himself in the mirror after he stepped out. Although he wasn't used to his current attire, he was very receptive. Seeing the familiar face in the mirror, Li Xian suddenly felt a sense of sadness. But, in the end, he still came out. He had changed into a completely modern attire, and at the same time had lost the long, elegant hair that had been the symbol of the ancient experts. The skin Wang Ling had given him wasn't based on the aesthetics of the ancient experts, but was completely modern. Li Xian, who was now dressed in modern attire, was the standard energetic little fellow. He had a buzz cut, was exceptionally handsome, and had the look of a celebrity. No wonder Dao ancestor Wang hadn't believed Li Xian's explanation back then. Although the Li Xian in the mirror had already lost his appearance from back then, he still had the air of a starwalker. He had the air of an artistic youth, and coupled with the pair of glasses that Wang Ling had given him without prescription, Li Xian's overall temperament was even more evident. Jiugong Shoushi, right? Li Xian searched through the memories Wang Ling had given him through a mental transmission, and confirmed the target of this operation. On the Jiugong family side, after Jiugong Xinghui, the sixth wife of the star-picking group, had been put to a stop by Wang Ling, only Jiugong Shoushi had been playing dirty. Li Xian's mission this time was to teach Jiugong Shoushi a lesson, and destroy the extra ghost book in passing. The Jiugong family had always regarded the ghost book as a symbol of family power, and the main book was like the imperial jade seal of the nation to them. After understanding the whole story, Li Xian suddenly feels that what is really scary is not the ghosts in the ghost record, but the human heart outside the ghost record. The poison in people's hearts had far surpassed the threat of the ghost record itself. Even though the Jiugong family had sealed the dangerous ghost manual in layers in the basement of the Jiugong family, the real danger was the struggle of the human heart caused by this small ghost manual. The members of the Jiugong family had unknowingly fallen into this fratricidal dispute. Since ancient times, Li Xian had seen too many killings. Although Earth was small, it was condensed and visible. Just like that, Li Xian went out to carry out Wang Ling's first task with the Supreme Corpse shrouding painting. The reason why Wang Ling was taking the corpse picture with him was actually the second task he had assigned to Li Xian. The main purpose was for Li Xianshan to help the ancient experts in the corpse wrapping painting familiarize themselves with modern society. This way, when he needed other people later on, he wouldn't need to adapt to them one by one. Of course, although Wang Ling was very reassured in giving the corpse wrapping painting to Li Xian, he didn't have to worry that Li Xian would run away with it. Although Li Xian was an ancient expert, the current Li Xian didn't have the ability or the guts. He was a smart person and knew what he had to do. They arrived on a modern street. When Li Xian saw modern human cultivators standing on flying swords or riding spirit cars in an orderly manner, waiting for traffic lights to turn green on the ground or in the air, many ancient experts were deeply moved. This was an era they had never seen before. No one had expected the cultivation civilization to become like this after ancient times. Why do modern cultivators have tempers like rabbits? Someone in the corpse wrapping painting sighed. That's right. Another person nodded in agreement. Back in ancient times, when a secret land opened, it was all about speed. Fighting for priority and the entrance to a secret land was a common occurrence. I wonder how the new mystic realms are distributed under the modern system? It's distributed according to the country's borders. Li Xian had already looked this up. He had taught Li Xian how to use the smartphone through a mental transmission. As for the phone in Li Xian's hand, it was Lotus Sun who had bought it for him. Eldest Miss was rich and overbearing, and Li Xian and the other ancient experts didn't lack funds at all. Country. Whichever country the entrance to a new secret land is opened in, that country will own it. As for the resources inside the secret land, the country will send a representative team to efficiently collect them and hand them over to the national treasury. Finally, the resources will be distributed according to the modern talent pool, Li Xian explained. Now, everything was different from the ancient times. Human cultivators had strict rules and systems. It was no longer the ancient times where people could kill and loot as they pleased. It was no longer the era where people could kill and loot at will. The violent ancient experts in the painting weren't used to all kinds of rules and regulations. But if they wanted to be free, this was a hurdle they had to go through. Thus, Li Xian waited patiently like everyone else at the intersection according to modern rules. Only when he saw the red light turn green did he use the levitation spell to slowly fly forward. Of course he could fly very fast. It was just that the road in front of him had a speed limit, and Li Xian really couldn't go fast. As a legal citizen who was still adapting to modern life, he felt that he had a lot to learn. Thus, when Li Xian arrived at the Jiugong family's house step by step, his ears twitched, and a lot of sounds immediately flowed into Li Xian's ears. At that moment, the one-eyed warrior under Hideshi Kuya was already secretly preparing to attack Jiugong Ryoko in the closed-door competition in the courtyard. It looked like he had arrived just in time. Li Xian sighed silently and put his hand on the main gate of the Jiugong family's mansion, ready to blast it open with the star cannon. But on second thought, he was afraid that this might be a violation of modern law. Furthermore, the star cannon's range was too wide. It would probably circle the earth several times, and who knew how many people would die along the way. Thus, after thinking it over, Li Xian pulled his hand back. He knocked politely on the door. "Is there anyone here?" Li Xian asked politely with a smile on his face, looking like an elegant gentleman. In the end, no one answered. Li Xian guessed that before One-Eyed took action, it was highly likely that he had already taken control of the entire Jiugong family. But in the current situation, he could not take the initiative to enter. This was trespassing. What if it was an act of force majeure caused by natural factors? At this moment, Li Xian raised his head and looked at the sky. In the depths of the universe, a huge meteorite was summoned by Li Xian and was falling toward the front gate of the Jiugong family's mansion. Yes. Li Xian was now planning summoning a meteorite to smash open the gate of the Jiugong family's residence. Chapter 1601. Of course, Li Xian knew that the impact of the falling meteorite would be great. Therefore, in order to avoid harming innocent people, he needed to make precise calculations. In addition to selecting a suitable meteorite from the vast universe, he also needed to accurately calculate its orbit, landing point, and the friction the meteorite would have to endure after entering the atmosphere. Only by doing all these could he ensure that the meteorite would be of a suitable size before it broke out of the atmosphere and fell. Of course, Li Xian also made double insurance. He set up a boundary with a radius of 20 meters around the gate of the Jiugong family's mansion. The falling meteorite would fall precisely into the center of the boundary. The resulting explosive impact would be blocked by the boundary. As the first expert to be sent out on a mission, Li Xian thought that his behavior was very polite and in line with the core values of socialist cultivation. Boom! When the huge explosion was accompanied by a mushroom cloud rising into the sky at the main entrance of the Jiugong family, the one-eyed samurai under Jiugong Hideshi and the group of black-clothed men who were listening to his arrangements were shocked. "What's going on? Go and take a look." "Yes." Two black-clothed ninjas responded and immediately left. This sudden situation surprised the one-eyed samurai. He had the entire Jiugong family under his control. He did not expect that something would go wrong at this critical juncture. "Come here." Frowning slightly, the one-eyed samurai felt that something was wrong. He grabbed Jiugong Hideshi's collar and glared at him. "Speak. What the hell are you doing?" Jiugong Hideshi was confused by the situation before him. He couldn't even understand how the plan he had prepared for so long would end up in the final stage of the plan. One Eye, who had always worked by his side and was the most loyal to him, would betray him. At this moment, One-Eyed was glaring at him furiously. His pupils were bloodshot, and he looked like he had gone mad. It was rumored that the ghost record would devour the hearts of those who wanted to fight for it. Jiugong Hideshi did not expect it to be true. "My mother treated you well. You can't do this to me." Jiugong Hideshi's eyes were filled with tears. He was trembling with fear. One-Eyed was more powerful than him. After losing One-Eyed, he was completely useless. "I've been working hard for you all these years. I have already repaid Madam's kindness. One-Eyed sneered, I won't kill you. This is my last mercy to you. However, I have no intention of letting the other members of the Jugong family off. What do you want to do? Sect annihilation. I can go to the police station. You have the guts to go to the police. The one-eyed warrior smiled. He was completely dismissive of Kwamiya Huishi's words. The dirty things you made me do in the past, if you add them all up, it's enough for you to be sentenced for decades. Although I've agreed to let you live, I can't guarantee that nothing will happen to your mind. Do you think anyone will believe a mental patient with a lame leg and a sorry figure on the street? As One-Eyed spoke, Hideshi Kyo was also trembling. Indeed, the one-eyed man's words hit the nail on the head, leaving him with almost no room to refute. Do you know why I advocated for you to live in seclusion and hide in this courtyard all year round? The one-eyed man said, you think you're in control of the whole situation, but in fact, it's just my scheme. As long as you're in this courtyard, how many people outside really know you, Hideshi Kyo? At this point, Hideshi Kyo's face was already full of astonishment. He didn't expect One-Eye's scheme to have started so long ago. I'm sorry. I'm looking for One-Eyed. May I ask, this should be the place. At this time, a clear male voice that One-Eye had never heard before came from outside the courtyard. Li Xian picked up the ninja in black who had gone out to gather intelligence with one hand as if he was carrying a chick, and then threw the ninja in front of One-Eye. He scratched his head politely and bowed slightly to express his apology. Sorry. It seems I used a little too much strength. After all, it's been a long time since I've met a junior who's only at the Golden Core stage. But this person shouldn't die. Please rest assured. In modern cultivation society, it was illegal to kill people casually. Li Xian paid special attention when he made his move just now, but how fragile was a Golden Core cultivator? In front of an immemorial level expert, he was like a blade of grass in a gale. He didn't even use much strength, but the person who went out almost died. One-Eyed sent a total of 2 people out. Now, the one thrown over by Li Xian was already at his last gasp. As for the other ninja in black, although he was unharmed, he was still quite frightened. To make it easier to distinguish, Li Xian pulled out all his hair. Thus, Li Xian looked at the baldy and said politely, sorry to trouble you. If anyone else suffocates later, I'll have to trouble you to continue CPR. This situation couldn't help but increase the pressure on the people present. No one knew where this madman had suddenly come from. He was simply a devil. I don't know you. Why have you come? One-Eye took a step forward, his hand already gripping the katana at his waist. He was especially wary of Li Xian's sudden appearance. I was entrusted by my master to deal with internal conflicts. In modern terms, can you also call me uncle? Li Xian said. Then the demon tower analyzed the situation in front of him. One-Eye didn't say a word. Li Xian could roughly figure out what was going on just by looking at it. As an ancient expert, he had seen many examples of living beings in the universe going extinct because of racial struggles. An ancient expert like Li Xian could guess what was going on even if he used his butt to think. He immediately laughed, but now it seems that you've already had internal strife. It doesn't seem appropriate to use the identity of uncle. Just think of me as an enthusiastic citizen passing by. Enthusiastic citizen. The corner of One-Eye's mouth twitched. Yes, I just passed by and came to see the situation. After all, a meteorite just fell on your house, and it happened to smash through the Jugong family's gate. Meteorite. Yes, a meteorite. Why do you think this meteorite was so accurate and smashed the Jugong family's gate? If someone had summoned it on purpose, that person would be too unscrupulous. We must strongly condemn it. Li Xian said. This meteorite was summoned by you. One-Eyed was shocked. Hey, have I been discovered? Li Xian sighed. The one-eyed man had a skeptical expression on his face. He immediately reached out and grabbed Jiugong Zaiwushi's neck. Don't act rashly. If you come any closer, I'll directly wring his neck. Don't worry, I won't come over. Li Xian took a step back. Anyway, you're going to die together soon. As soon as he finished speaking, Li Xian looked up at the sky. Everyone here followed his gaze. Accompanied by an incomparably dazzling light in the sky, another 2 incomparably huge meteorites were rapidly falling from the sky. Li Xian also engraved a few words on the 2 meteorites. 1 east. 1 wind. Chapter 1602. Another 2 meteorites fell from the sky. This, falling stars, was a common trick used by Li Xian when he traveled across the universe, and he was very familiar with it. Li Xian's highest record was to summon 30,000 meteorites with a diameter of 60 meters to land at the same time. But that was a long time ago. At that time, Li Xian was still fighting against Hao ancestor Wang to avoid being sucked into the corpse wrapping picture, and now it was proved that his resistance was completely useless. Li Xian had used the trick of controlling the meteorites to land many times. For him, these destructive meteorites were merely playthings that he could summon and dismiss at any time. He was an ancient master. With such strength, ordinary earth cultivators could hardly understand it. But for ordinary earth cultivators such as One-Eyed, the current situation was undoubtedly a devastating blow. Li Xian was too strong. He was more powerful than expected. One-Eyed could feel a sense of panic from the bottom of his heart just by standing there without revealing any aura. Although his hand had long grasped the katana, he found that he could not move at all. The fear in his heart had made him completely lose the battle. At this time, Li Xian walked over without saying a word and just stood in front of One-Eyed without doing anything. One-Eyed and the black-clothed ninjas around him all knelt on the ground with their legs weak. They were all frozen. The horrible aura emitted from Li Xian froze their blood and made them unable to move. One-Eyed was horrified. At this time, Li Xian drew out the katana from his waist, made a posture of throwing a pole, and suddenly threw it forward. Chi! As Li Xian threw the ordinary-looking katana, it was covered with a layer of golden light film. Like a meatball, it strung the 2 meteorites that were about to fall on the surface of the earth and took them away from the surface of the earth. Then, the Big Bang took place in the universe. Have you experienced the feeling of death? At this time, Li Xian took out the scabbard of the katana in One-Eye's frozen hand and gently touched it with his fingertip. The scabbard, which was made of spiritual iron, instantly turned into powder. The gap in strength was obvious. Even if Li Xian did not release any aura, One-Eyed had already known that the person standing in front of him could crush him like an ant at any time. He did not intend to kill One-Eyed at all. That was nonsense. Murder is against the law. As a role model among the ancient masters, Li Xian certainly had to be a law-abiding citizen. Of course, there was a deeper reason why he didn't kill One-Eyed. It's all over. It was already dark outside. Li Xian looked up at the starry sky. He waved his sleeve. A wave of energy immediately spread out with him as the center. One-Eye felt an intense pain flash through his head. Accompanied by this pain, One-Eye spat out a large mouthful of blood. He knew that all the restrictions he had set up in the Jiugong family had been removed in an instant. Soon, the master of the Q family, Q Ryoko's father, who was restrained and unable to move, arrived with a large group of people from outside the courtyard occupied by the one-eyed man. You're a blind ingrate. Shichen trusted you so much before he left. You actually dared to do such a thing. Kyoakaji, the head of the Kyo family, shouted in a stern voice. One-Eye just lowered his head. He seemed to know that he had lost the upper hand, so he didn't argue back. On the other side, Q Hideshi's eyes widened when he saw this scene. He seemed to have thought of something and was very surprised. Hideshi, are you all right? Kyo Akagi couldn't help but ask with concern when he saw Hideshi's pale face. I'm fine, father. Kyo Akagi said softly. He didn't dare to look into his father's eyes. Because just a few hours ago, he was here preparing a plan to kill his half-sister. I didn't expect Shichen to entrust you to such an evil person. Kyo Akagi hugged Hideshi tightly. His son's safety made him feel much more at ease. Immediately, he flew into a rage and raised his hand. Guards! Capture this one-eyed man for me. Send him to the police. Yes. His subordinates swarmed forward. They put something similar to the spiritual shackles on One Eye to restrict his strength. Then, they tied up One Eye and the ninjas in black and escorted them away. Throughout the whole process, One Eye and the ninjas in black who were trying to eat breakfast were silent. For a moment, the silence was a little scary. After coming back to his senses, Kyo Akagi bowed and thanked Li Xian. Thank you for your help, Your Excellency. If it weren't for you, my Kyo family would have fallen into the hands of these rebels and traitors tonight. He had precisely found Li Xian. In fact, it was Li Xian who had transmitted what had just happened to Kyo Akagi's mind with his mental strength. Summoning a meteorite and instantly lifting the restriction, Kyo Akagi had no choice but to give this kind of big shot face. And most importantly, Li Xian had saved Kyo Hideshi. For Kyo Akagi, this was a debt he couldn't repay. But Your Excellency and I don't know each other. Why did you help me? At that moment, Kyo Akagi was eager to know Li Xian's true identity. He knew that this so-called warm-hearted citizen was just an excuse. Looking at Kyo Akagi's eyes, which were full of curiosity, Li Xian sighed slightly. He couldn't directly say that his master was Wang Ling, but he could mention something else. Actually, I'm a member of the Grey Church, Li Xian said. Grey Church. Kyo Akagi frowned. For some reason, he felt that this church sounded a little familiar. Previously, Kyo Akagi, the shareholders of foreign companies, and Yuki Kuniyama from the administration office all seemed to have some complaints about this student literary exchange club. Kyo Akagi hadn't cared at first, but now he finally understood the importance of this Grey Church. A student organization actually had such a big shot hiding in it. Furthermore, the other party clearly claimed to be a member of the Grey Church. This proved that someone of Li Xian's level wasn't the head of the Grey Church, so the question was, who on earth was the head of the Grey Church? Now, even Kyo Akagi was a little curious. After dealing with One Eye and the others, Kyo Akagi very warmly invited Li Xian to attend a shock banquet that evening. It was mainly for his eldest son, Kyo Hideshi, and the other children who had been frightened by this storm. After this incident, the internal strife in the Kyo family would cease for a while. Kyo Akagi was the one who had stuck his head out to begin with. Now that he had been taught a lesson, even if the others wanted to, they probably wouldn't have the guts to make a move in the short term. Kyo Ryoko, who was still in Huashio Nation, had already become the biggest winner. After 3 rounds of drinking, Li Xian went to the balcony, lit a cigarette, and put it in his mouth. Smoking. This was what he had just learned. Sitting in his wheelchair, Kyo Akagi gazed at the moon and didn't say a word for a very long time. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, he slowly lowered his head. Only then did he slowly lower his head. Mr. Li Xian, did you already know? Kyo Akagi knew that Li Xian wasn't an ordinary person. Kyo Akagi had never understood why One Eye had suddenly turned against him. He was clearly such a loyal person. However, when One-Eyed and the group of black-clothed ninjas were detained and everyone was taken away so quietly, Hideshi Komiya instantly understood. Because this is the only way he can protect you, Li Xian said leisurely. One-Eye's intentions. Actually, he had already known when he had stepped into the courtyard. It was precisely because of this that Li Xian hadn't killed him. It wasn't just out of consideration for modern law. In essence, I was a loyal and affectionate person. He hadn't let down his promise to the eldest madam of the Qiu family back then. He was still doing his best to protect Qiu Akaji. Chapter 1603. Li Xian had long since seen through the nature of the problem. In the end, this was One Eye's own choice, and as an outsider, he couldn't be bothered to interfere. One Eye was a smart man. Although it looked like he had taken control of the entire Jiugong family, it was actually an attempted crime, and no one had died. His sentence probably wouldn't be a death sentence. Perhaps it would be a long one. But even if it was a long one, he probably wouldn't have the chance to be locked up with the Mahjong trio. The Mahjong trio actually didn't have anything to do with Li Xian, but since he knew so much, it was naturally Wang Ling who had passed on some of the more basic information to him. He was well aware that he was just a tool to Wang Ling, and would inevitably have to run errands for him in the future. But Li Xian didn't care about this position. Especially after clearly recognizing the gap between him and Wang Ling, he felt that working under Wang Ling wasn't a bad choice. He could just treat it as cultivation. After smoking his second cigarette on the balcony, he saw Hideshi Jiugong sitting in his wheelchair, looking downtrodden. For some reason, he suddenly felt the atmosphere a little sad. "Mr. Li, may I ask a question?" Hideshi Jiugong asked. "Go ahead. Why didn't you tell my father the truth?" "Because it was eldest Miss Jiugong's idea." "Her." Hideshi Jiugong had an incredulous expression on his face. "Miss Jiugong Ryoko knows very well what you're thinking, but she doesn't want to argue." "But, why?" Hideshi Jiugong lowered his head. "She clearly hates me the most. I'm a cripple, and I don't contribute anything to the Jiugong family, but you're still her brother." Li Xian said, "Do you remember the candy apple you bought for her when she took you to the temple fair in her wheelchair? That alone is enough." These short sentences had already triggered Hideshi Jiugong's thoughts. Hideshi Jiugong didn't know what on earth was wrong with him, but his tears fell like pearls from a broken necklace. "Your leg healed a long time ago, right? No matter how many things you did to Miss Ryoko in the past, since she chose to forgive you. As outsiders, I naturally have no right to say anything," Li Xian said softly. He patted Jiugong Zaiwashi's shoulder and said, "A man's leg can be broken, but not forever. Even if you did something wrong, it's not shameful to stand up and take responsibility." Having said that, Li Xian returned to the banquet hall alone. He felt that his mission this time was quite successful. Wang Ling had adopted a mission point system for all the ancient experts in the corpse burial picture, including Li Xian and Zhang Zidong. Every time they completed a mission, they would receive a corresponding amount of points as a reward. Once they had accumulated enough points, they would be able to rebuild their bodies and regain their freedom. It was a fair trade. To Li Xian and the other ancient experts, points were money. Li Xian admitted that he had never acted as a spiritual mentor after a fight. But since he had accepted the task, he naturally had to do it well. It was about making money. It wasn't shabby. At the same time, Wang Ling officially won the Sun Island High School ranking competition behind closed doors as King Lang. Even Wang Ling hadn't expected this. The main thing was that Wang Ling himself hadn't made a move at all. Every opponent he had encountered had claimed to be a member of the Great Church and a fan of his. It was supposed to be a good match, but he was unexpectedly gifted to first place. The most outrageous thing was that at the beginning, these people had even put on an act. Later, as they put on an act, even the referees at the scene said they were fans of the Great Church, and the judging mechanism had been changed. Thus, no matter how fake the performance of the match was, it wouldn't be judged as fixed. In front of him, all the opponents Wang Ling had encountered had fallen like dominoes. When the 1 million Sun Island dollars from the competition had been transferred into Wang Ling's digital wallet, Wang Ling still hadn't reacted. He had never had such an easy match before. He had gotten the money, and he hadn't been in the limelight. He hadn't violated the old Wang family's rule of keeping a low profile. And that wasn't all. Through this round of closed-doors competition, the Great Church's rules on Sun Island seemed to be expanding further. In the 9 Paths and the Office of Academic Affairs, Yuki Genshin's plan to find fault in the closed-doors competition collapsed with the public defection of some of the students, teachers, and coaches. Until now, he still hadn't figured out what on earth had happened. At the same time, the foreign gentleman sitting next to him, Holland, had an extremely unsightly expression on his face after receiving a call. Because just a minute ago, the educational investment financial institution they were in had actually been bought out. Furthermore, the 9 Paths and family had offered a price that the major shareholders couldn't refuse, and the acquisition had been realized. This meant that the 9 Paths and high school's actual control had now returned to the Jiugong family. That's impossible. Yuki Junshan immediately roared when he heard the news. He couldn't accept this fact. As a purebred shepherd dog, he had already invested all his savings and efforts into Holland's foreign educational institution, all for the sake of realizing his true ambition one day, which was to become the headmaster of 9 Paths and high school. To completely control 9 Paths and high school. But now, the actual controlling stake had been subverted in a short period of time. This was something that Yuki Junshan could never have imagined. Who the hell did this? Yuki Junshan grabbed Holland's collar in exasperation. Mr. Yuki, calm down. Holland also had a helpless expression on his face. This is the doing of the Jiugong family's Jiugong Akaji. In fact, even if Holland didn't say it, Yuki Junshan would have already guessed it. In the Jiugong family, who else could amass so much money in such a short period of time and swallow up other businesses like a big fish devouring a small fish? Akaji. It's him. Yuki Junshan suddenly felt as if his body had lost its strength. He only felt unsteady. Akaji. I thought he didn't think highly of education. Why would he suddenly want to become a headmaster? Let me tell you a scary story, Mr. Yuki Junshan. What is it? At this moment, Holland quietly said, I heard that Mr. Akaji has also become a member of the Great Church. Huh? Yuki Junshan was confused. Holland, let me tell you another scary story, Mr. Holland. Yuki Junshan, ? Holland, actually, me too, Yuki Junshan. Chapter 1604. A grand celebration was held in the treehouse of Kudaiwa High School for the first student of Sun Island, Queen Lang. It used to be a place for the students of Class S to show off their superiority. But now, as the Great Church expanded, Kudaiwa still maintained the grading system on the surface, but in fact, the discrimination in all aspects had greatly decreased. The students of Class S who used to look down on others had also become humble. At least, when they saw the students of the lower classes, most of them would no longer act high and mighty. Even in the corners of the school, the students of Class S could be seen teaching the students of the lower classes in public in harmony. The school was equal. It was the trend of the times. Currently, Leek Sasaki had applied for the abolition of the grading system in the name of the Great Church's branch minister. He believed that he would get a response soon. As for those who liked to bully others, after the Kyo family regained control of Kudaiwa High School, they would not tolerate such problems easily. The next morning, which was Monday, December 21st, Wamaki Kyu-san was prosecuted by the Sun Island police and prosecutors for abuse of power and bribery. When he left Kudaiwa High School in handcuffs, he looked a little depressed as he stood at the school gate. But no one had the slightest sympathy for Wamaki Kyu-san. He had gone crazy. His eyes were bloodshot, and his mental state had become very unstable. Everyone could tell that he was from the Great Church. You. Are you from the Grey Church? You must be from the Grey Church too. You're all in this together. Liar. Liar. Wimaki Q-san screamed hysterically. His body twisted madly, but he was tightly restrained by the police's grand grappling hand. Because they were worried that his resistance might injure the suspect during the transport, the police had no choice but to use a tranquilizer spell on him. When he was sent to the car, the captain of the local police station in charge of the case, Ichiro, smiled coldly. Tranquilizer spell and sleeping black tea. This guy will definitely sleep for dozens of hours. His mental state is very unstable. Is it really okay? Don't look at him like that. He's probably faking it. The psychiatrist came to examine him. He's very normal. The police captain, Ichiro, said, using mental illness to escape the punishment of the law won't work here. I hate this kind of person the most. I'll definitely give this guy a few more years. In fact, the psychiatrist was sent by the Jogong family. Furthermore, the doctor joined the Grey Church under the request of the Kyuya family's master, Kyuya Akaji, so in the process of escorting Yuki Jun-shan. The Grey Church became the new topic of discussion among the accompanying policemen. Come to think of it, this Grey Church should only be a student literary organization, right? Why is he so powerful? A police officer asked. He was not a child. But there were really a lot of question marks. A student literature club actually had the support of the Battle Sect, the Hwagwol Water Curtain Group, the Jogong family, and the first-rate sects of various countries. These were all sects and consortiums that were renowned throughout the world. It was unbelievable that he would help a small literary club in the dark. Don't think too much about it. It's just a coincidence, Ichiro said. He looked like he didn't care at all. In fact, this was the result of his superior's advice. The Grey Church adhered to the principle of keeping a low profile, so the leaders of all departments had specially instructed that they weren't allowed to discuss the Grey Church internally or externally. Just this point alone was enough for Officer Ichiro to know that this was something that he should not have known. So for his own good and for his subordinates' sake, since his superiors had asked them to pretend they didn't know, he would obey this order. Thus, no matter who it was in the team, as long as someone mentioned the Grey Church, Ichiro would put on an indifferent expression. Captain, do you want to join the Grey Church? Someone asked at that moment. What's so good about joining a student organization? How many years has it been since we graduated? Will anyone really join the Grey Church? That can't be, right? Ichiro chuckled and scoffed. Meanwhile, elsewhere. In Jodao High School's student office, Sparrow was entering a new list of Grey Church members into the computer. She tapped on the keyboard and typed in the first name. Ichiro in green shirt, number 60 High's group returned home at 8:00 that evening. They took the Jogong family's express flight and used the Jogong family's private immortal boat. The Jogong family's matter had been perfectly resolved, and Wang Ling had also received the reward for buying little girl Nwan a present. There didn't seem to be any more regrets. According to his itinerary, Wang Ling would be able to return to the Wang family's small villa with the present that night. Thanks to Chive Sasaki's meticulous arrangements, Wang Ling was able to isolate himself from the fanatical Grey Church disciples outside in a separate room inside the wooden hut. Lotus Sun was giving a thank you speech outside, and the bursts of applause and laughter suddenly gave Wang Ling a special sense of security. He was grateful to the girl in his heart. If she hadn't been here, he really wouldn't have known how he would have dealt with this situation. Lang-san, will I have a chance to see you again in the future? Compared with the joyous atmosphere outside, Chive Sasaki, who was already very familiar with Wang Ling inside the wooden hut, had a very sad expression on his face. He was reluctant to part with Wang Ling. Although he hadn't spent much time with him, he felt that he had already been completely conquered by Wang Ling. In fact, Wang Ling had seen how busy Chive Sasaki had been these 2 days. And most importantly, he was really thoughtful, and had thought of almost everything. He could also be considered the first foreign friend Wang Ling had made. Wang Ling naturally treasured him very much. "I will," Wang Ling replied. He didn't know what to say to express his gratitude, so he gave Chive Sasaki an enchanted number 60 high school uniform. The weather on Sun Island was hot, and there was no need to enchant long johns, so Wang Ling thought it would be more practical to give him a school uniform. Furthermore, this uniform was different from the ones he had enchanted at the beginning. It was a brand new upgrade. This number 60 high school uniform had been enchanted with Wang Ling version 3.0, and was extremely strong. It would be fine even if it was transported into space. Wang Ling was currently wearing the same uniform. This was also the main reason why Wang Ling's uniform had remained intact in all kinds of space battles. If it had been anyone else, their clothes would have long since been torn to shreds. "Ah, that's right. Lang-san. I also have a present for you." Chive Sasaki wiped his tears and gave Wang Ling the present he had prepared. There were 2 things in total. One of them was a pink one-piece baby's pajamas with a very cute picture of a little bear on it. The other was Sun Island's limited edition, Sun Crispy Noodle Snacks. It was said that this crispy noodle snack was made in a very special way, and was baked in the sun. It smelled of nature. Wang Ling looked at these 2 things. Of course, the main thing was the second one. Wang Ling suddenly felt that his gift of the number 60 high school uniform was a little light. Chapter 1605. The happiest person was naturally Kyoko Ryoko, who had been waiting for news in faraway Huashio Nation. These days, Kwamiya Ryoko has been paying close attention to the movements of the Kwamiya family. She had expected some twists and turns. Unexpectedly, everything was handled in an unusually harmonious manner. Most importantly, the Great Church had actually become popular on Sun Island. Even though it didn't have much influence on the surface, Kamiya Ryoko felt that it was a little outrageous to be able to attract her father to join a literary exchange fan club specially set up for Wang Ling. It could only be said that Lotus Sun was worthy of being the opponent she had always respected. This time, everything she had asked Lotus Sun to do was done beautifully, and she handed in an answer sheet that was close to full marks. However, Ryoko Kamiya felt that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. "What's wrong? You look absent-minded." Chuo put some food in Kamiya Ryoko's bowl. When there was a contrast in emotions, it was actually very obvious. Chuo was very happy. Because his master was coming back. Zhou Zi was also in a good mood because his legs were already in a state of growth. After being planted on the broken leg, a toe had already grown out. Now that Zhou Zi's legs were covered by an insulating glass cover, he felt like he was taking care of 2 pots of flowers. However, it was different from the usual watering method. Apart from keeping warm, Zhou Zi also needed to ingest a large amount of nutrients to ensure the smooth growth of the flesh at the amputated part of his leg. Seeing that Ryoko Kuya wasn't saying anything, Chuo simply guessed what the girl was thinking. After living together for so long, Chuo felt that they still had this level of tacit understanding. "If you want to thank classmate Lotus Sun, I actually have a pretty good suggestion." Chuo suddenly smiled. Of course, other than this reason, he also thought of something else. But at this critical juncture, he couldn't bring it up on his own initiative. From the perspective of learning routines, Chuo felt. After such a long time, tonight was the best time for a showdown. Who wants to thank her? The girl's face instantly turned red. Ryoko Kamiya felt that the man's eyes were terrifyingly accurate. It was as if he knew some kind of mind-reading spell. He was always able to hit her where it hurt. But Chuo didn't have that ability, the main problem was that the girl herself had revealed a flaw. For example, when Audra had gone online in the morning, he had seen the following search results in the search engine. What does the young mistress of Hogwarts Water Curtain Group like? What does Lotus Sun like to eat? What hobbies does Lotus Sun of Hogwarts Water Curtain Group have? Yes. Ryoko Kamiya was a newbie on the internet. She usually didn't know how to search for similar things. She would ask her female assistants to search for it and then tell her in turn. But now that she had been staying at Audra's place for the past few days, it wasn't appropriate for her to ask him directly, so she wanted to do it herself. In the end, she didn't even know to delete the search history. This is a deal. Equivalent trade. Helpless, Ryoko Kamiya could only confess. But the truth was that the girl clearly looked a little guilty when she said this, because she was hiding something else from him. The two of them interacted and lived together. On the surface, it was the relationship between employer and bodyguard. However, in the eyes of outsiders, they were already a couple. At least when Josie stayed with them for the past few days, he always called her sister-in-law. Ryoko Kamiya had thought that he would mind. On the surface, she scolded Josie not to say anything else, but in her heart, she didn't dislike this form of address. She wasn't a fool. She had told Audra that it was the relationship between employer and bodyguard, but how could an employer directly live in a bodyguard's house? Although Ryoko Kamiya hadn't said anything about this relationship, it was clear from her actions that she had already acknowledged Audra. Now that the matter with the Kamiya family had been resolved, Lotus Sun and the others were about to return to China. Order would return to normal. What gift to buy for Lotus Sun as a thank you gift was a headache for Ryoko. But the main reason was that she felt that once order returned to normal, she would have to leave this place. Even when she had first stayed at Audra's place, Ryoko Kamiya had been uncomfortable in all sorts of ways, but now that she was about to leave, she realized that Audra had long since laid out an inescapable net to trap her. The dinner was tasteless. Josie was smart. He had a vague feeling that something big was going to happen tonight, so he hid in his room after dinner and didn't say a word. Seeing this, Audra knew that the time was right. He took the initiative to knock on Ryoko Kamiya's door. The door wasn't tightly shut and was only slightly ajar. Audra knocked twice before it opened. When he entered, he saw that Ryoko was packing up her things in a storage bag. There were two faint traces of tears on her face and her eyes were red, as if she had just been crying. Audra didn't say anything. He just stepped forward, stretched out his arms, and hugged Ryoko tightly from behind. Are you really leaving, Ryoko? His voice was so soft that only the two of them could hear it. From the moment Audra entered the door. From the moment he said those words. Ryoko Kamiya felt that the last line of defense in her heart had been breached. Her legs were a little weak and the storage bag in her hand directly fell to the ground. Wiping away her tears, she said, I've always said that you're a liar. Actually, I'm the liar. There will always be times when a person lies in life. One or two lies are very normal. Besides, even if Ryoko lies, it must be a kind lie. Audra laughed and buried his face in the girl's shoulder as he spoke softly. But this lie of mine, it's not kind. Ryoko Kamiya suddenly pushed Audra away, straightened her flat upper body slightly, and pressed her head against Audra's chest. Audra felt his body temperature rise sharply, and he instantly exploded. It was rare for the girl to take the initiative, which made him burst with joy. I also have something I'm hiding from you. How about this, you tell me one and I'll tell you one, let's trade, Audra said. Ryoko Kamiya looked at Audra's eyes and could no longer suppress the guilt of telling a lie. She stared at Audra and plucked up her courage to say, Audra, actually, I'm not 16. I'm older than classmate Lotus Sun. I'm 20 this year. Audra nodded, his expression as calm as an ancient well. This had always been Ryoko Kamiya's biggest secret. At least in her own eyes, it was a secret. But Audra didn't care at all. Because this meant that he and Ryoko Kamiya could date normally. And he wouldn't have to be accused of being a pervert who liked a 16-year-old girl. Why, aren't you surprised at all? Ryoko was very surprised by Audra's indifferent reaction. I like you, what does age have to do with it? Even if you tell me you're a 200-year-old witch, I won't mind. Audra hugged the girl tighter as he spoke. Who's a witch? Ryoko Kamiya bit Audra's shoulder with tears in her eyes. Audra didn't make a sound. After a few seconds, he asked, feeling better. Then in exchange, I'll also tell you something I've been hiding from you. At that moment, Audra said, do you remember the first time you came to number 60 high to look for me? Of course. I remember. I've liked you since then. Chapter 1606. The issue of age had always been a thorn in Jamiya Ryoko's heart, especially after she realized that she really liked Audra, which made her feel even more guilty. She had clearly been entrusted by her family to come to Washo Nation and specifically investigate this old swindler, hoping to take advantage of this crackdown to expand the Jogong family's market in Washo Nation. In the end, because of Audra's age, Kamiya Ryoko felt that she had no right to reprimand him. She was also a liar. Now that she had told him the truth, she felt much more at ease. The two of them cuddled in the bedroom for a while, both of them feeling a great sense of satisfaction. Since they had already laid all their cards on the table, Ryoko Kamiya didn't put up a front anymore. She let go of her guard and let Audra hug her. Previously, when Audra had carried her, Ryoko Kamiya had complained that it was too hot. But he didn't say a single word. Do you want to continue playing? After a while, Kamiya Ryoko suddenly said, a game of exchanging secrets. Audra replied calmly, all right. The girl had thought that Audra would refuse, but hadn't expected him to be so straightforward. You first or I first? Audra laughed and deliberately moved his face very close with the air of a hooligan. Then, I'll go first. My secret is that I actually have a master. You really have a master? Ryoko was shocked. There had always been a rumor that Audra had a shifu, and many people even said that he had relied on this shifu to help him become a war hero 6 years ago. But until now, no one had seen Shifu's true appearance. A lot of people imagined Audra's shifu to be a sage-like old Taoist priest, and a variety show even launched a long-term follow-up investigation into this matter. However, the investigation found that Audra's work route was actually very stable. Apart from going to the general administration of 100 schools, his own apartment, and going to some schools for business reasons, he didn't do anything else out of the ordinary. What sage-like old Taoist priest? Not even a strand of hair of this legendary master could be seen. Most of the people around Audra were students who surrounded him for autographs. All of them wore oversized school uniforms and had fluffy hair. Their faces were full of collagen and childishness. They didn't look like Shifu at all. Then, many people turned their attention to the principals of some schools. For example, number 60 High's headmaster Chin had once been suspected of being Audra's Shifu. However, after these principals were suspected, they all went to the media to clarify their suspicions. They even made oaths, in front of a national audience, no one would joke about it. It said that your master is a sage-like old Taoist. That shouldn't be the case, right? Ryoko Kamiya asked. Audra gently pinched Kamiya Ryoko's nose. We agreed that each of you would say one. He couldn't pursue the matter. It's your turn. Kamiya Ryoko showed a helpless expression. She sighed and said, all right, then I'll tell you a secret. Actually, my puberty is a little delayed. Audra swept a glance over Kamiya Ryoko's flat airport runway, his expression as calm as an ancient well. He had seen it from the beginning. But the problem was that he felt that this was all in the open. Ryoko, you're too cunning, how can this be considered a secret? Of course. How can it not be? Kamiya Ryoko struggled to say, if I say my puberty is delayed, that means it's not like there's no possibility of me growing up in the future. Audra was rendered speechless by her retort. He didn't say anything, and just hugged Kamiya Ryoko. Of course, when you liked someone, you liked everything about them. Forget the fact that Kamiya Ryoko was a flat airport runway right now, even if it was the Mariana Trench, he would still like her. Furthermore, Audra didn't have a good impression of girls who were especially well developed to begin with, and preferred flat ones to be cute. Ryoko, I don't mind this at all. He hugged the girl tightly. This series of confessions had a strong impact, and Kamiya Ryoko's mind went blank. She felt that this might be Audra's unique charisma. He was a bold person who would make a move when he had to, and without the slightest bit of hesitation. Kamiya Ryoko had always had doubts about the world 6 years ago. Audra was just a golden core cultivator, so why had he charged to the forefront so bravely? Now, after getting to know Audra, Kamiya Ryoko began to understand a little. This was a man who, once he set his mind on something, would do it without hesitation. I'm done. You're the most cunning person. Kamiya Ryoko fanned her flushed cheeks, then looked at Audra and asked, I have one last question. You want to ask about classmate Lotus-san, right? That's right. I don't even know how to thank her. It was all thanks to her that our Kamiya family's matter was resolved smoothly this time, said Kamiya Ryoko. After this incident, the conflict between her and Kamiya Hideshi had completely come to an end. As for the sixth madam who had been possessed by a ghost, she was now in the process of removing the ghost from her body. Your father actually didn't separate from her. After so many years, he still has feelings for her. Also, the Star Pluckers have some influence on Sun Island. For the sake of stabilizing the situation, even if my father has this idea, he can't make it public for the time being. I see. Audra rubbed his chin. In fact, he was also trying to figure out his future father-in-law's preferences in a roundabout way. Judging from the time they had spent together, Kukia Akaji seemed to be a man of affection and righteousness. Although he had 6 wives, at least he was able to shoulder this burden evenly, and a bowl of water could also be carried evenly. Furthermore, he indeed cared about each and every one of his family members. As long as he could show some sincerity in the future, he didn't think it would be a big problem. He realized that he liked Kamiya Ryoko more than he had imagined. Especially now that he was holding her. He felt like he owned the whole world. Monday, December 21st, number 60 High's party returned to Washo Nation without a hitch. On this trip, Wang Ming had collected a bunch of new clues about talismans, as well as new data that he had deduced. As soon as he landed, he and Jai-in hurried to the lab. And he had follow-up plans. He was also going to meet that civilian scientist, Shochong. As for Audra, as soon as Wang Ling landed, he went straight to the airport to pick him up. Receiving a shifu was what a disciple should do. Of course, he also had some selfish motives, and that was the problem with Zhou Zi. Shifu, do you want a grand disciple? The kind who can be a tool and make crispy noodle snacks. Audra asked nervously as he gripped the steering wheel in the car. Chapter 1607. Actually, he had never thought about having another grand disciple. But he knew that Audra's career was developing like a raging fire. More and more people admired Audra, and when Audra's own light was enough to illuminate the world, this kind of thing was actually unavoidable. Wang Ling had heard about Zhou Zi when he was on Sun Island. This was a condition to rope in the teacher named Zhou Xiang. The fat that Wang Ling had rubbed off from his body all those years ago was in fact all-purpose material for shaping the body. Just a little bit of it could be used to reattach a broken limb or even create a new body. After that, he helped Li Xian, Zhang Zidong, and the others build their bodies. He planned to make use of this fat waste he had rubbed off from his body in the past. Since he could even reconstruct the bodies of ancient experts, reattaching a broken leg was as easy as lifting a finger for Wang Ling, but after careful consideration, Audrey hadn't asked Wang Ling to do it, and had instead asked Wang Xin and Lu Qingyi to find out how to plant the leg. The leg technique from the domain of the gods had about the same effect as Wang Ling's, except that it lacked in speed and strength. If the planted leg was reattached with the fat from Wang Ling's body, if this pair of legs were normal, it would be a pair of invincible diamond legs. Although the method of the god domain was a little slow and inferior, it was still the idea of a few Tao gods. If it really matured, it would not be bad. Moreover, it would surpass most cultivators on earth. Back then, when Wang Ling had heard about how Audrey had helped Zhou Zi, he had felt that Audrey was especially concerned about this teenager with a broken leg. At that time, Wang Ling had vaguely sensed some signs. It was just that he hadn't expected Audrey to bring up the matter of accepting a disciple so quickly. Moreover, it was his first day back in the country. Wang Ling cupped his chin as he pondered carefully. In fact, he was also considering the feasibility of this idea. Classmate Zhou Zi, what do you think of Senior Audrey after meeting him? Lotus Sun hurriedly asked in the car when she saw that Wang Ling had fallen silent. Audrey had said that he was taking her in as his disciple, and had no intention of avoiding her at all. In fact, he had wanted her to put in a good word for him. The young lady also received this signal, which was why she chose to speak at this moment. He's a very clever man. Very much like me when I was young, Audrey commented. He particularly liked Zhou Zi's quick reaction. Of course, what he liked the most was still Zhou Zi's positive and optimistic attitude. Ever since he had started working and even been given the halo of a hero, Audrey had always felt that life had smoothed out his edges and corners. However, he felt a little bit of his younger self in Zhou Zi. Thus, he had this thought in his mind at that time. Wang Ling could tell that this wasn't a lie. The question and answer exchange between Lotus Sun and Audrey felt a little like a crosstalk performance. But Audrey's answer was very sincere. But Audrey knew that this was actually a little sudden, so after expressing his opinion, he laughed it off. Shifu, I'm just asking for your opinion first, it's fine if you don't think it's okay. Thus, his tone of speaking to Wang Ling suddenly became respectful, which made Wang Ling a little uncomfortable. It's indeed a bit sudden. But I think, if we keep Zi by our side, and push him out to be a genius youth and nurture him, it'll be a great success. At that time, everyone's attention will be focused on Zi. It's also a very good cover for you, Master. Wang Ling nodded silently in his heart. This was true. He had heard before that Zhou Zi's cultivation talent was actually pretty good, and that even with a broken leg, he could still keep up with the standard of a normal earth cultivator at his age. If his leg hadn't been broken, his basic talent should have been about the same as Lotus Sun's. But to be cautious, Wang Ling didn't agree straight away. He still decided to observe him for a while longer before making a decision. When Wang Ling got home, it was already past 9:00 in the evening. As soon as he entered the door, he felt a soft glutinous rice ball hug his leg, and then climb up skillfully until it was at his shoulder. Only then did she stop and lie down on his body. Then, she rubbed that fair, tender, and milky little face against his cheek like a little kitten. This kind of intimate contact had always been a big taboo for Wang Ling. But the strange thing was that when Wang Wan approached him like this, Wang Ling didn't feel the slightest urge to push this little girl away. It was to the extent that Wang Ling began to have this thought. He thought his little sister was too cute, It was so good to have a little sister. Wang Ling couldn't deny that this was most likely due to the power of their blood relationship. Of course, there was an even more important point. Although little girl Nwan had just been born, but he and his little sister had already fought side by side. At that time, Nwan's shadow had also been lying on his shoulder like this. Wang Ling thought that it might have been from that time that Nwan had developed some kind of dependence on him. Father and Mother Wang were holding all kinds of toys in their left and right hands, and looked like they were about to put the little girl to sleep. Both of them had been tortured badly, and their hair was disheveled. Now that Wang Wan had suddenly calmed down, Father and Mother Wang breathed a sigh of relief, but at the same time, they were amazed. That's strange. Ling Ling, have you already met Wan? She seems to be very dependent on you. Mother Wang couldn't help covering her mouth as she laughed. Before Wang Ling had come home, what the couple had been most worried about was whether brother and sister could get along peacefully. Now that they saw this heartwarming scene, Father and Mother Wang instantly knew that they had been overthinking things. As soon as they entered, the little girl, who had been making a fuss earlier, suddenly crawled over like a cat sniffing out fish. Then, she lay on Wang Ling's shoulder, closed her eyes, and fell into a deep sleep. Father and Mother Wang were deeply moved by this scene. They couldn't help taking out their phones to snap pictures of the warm scene of brother and sister getting along harmoniously from all angles. Hey, honey, little girl Nwan can only fall asleep on Ling Ling's shoulder now. What should we do? Ling Ling still has to go to school. After taking pictures, Father Wang couldn't help feeling a little worried. After all, Nwan was still growing up. If she could only fall asleep on Wang Ling's shoulder, it would indeed be bad for her growth and development. How about we take on Nwan with Ling Ling when he goes to school? Mother Wang suddenly suggested. Father Wang clapped his hands and called her a professional. Great! I think it's doable. It'll be like preschool. Wang Ling. Chapter 1608. Father and Mother Wang's idea wasn't just for show, it was for real. When Wang Ling realized that Nwan would really go to school with him tomorrow, he couldn't help feeling a little flustered. Of course, Nwan's real body wouldn't go with Wang Ling, but a shadow would lie on Wang Ling's shoulder, just like when they had fought side by side in the Supreme World. What the shadow heard, what it learned, and what it sensed could all be transmitted back to the real body at the same time. Furthermore, cultivators with lower realms. That was, the students and alumni of number 60 high school. They couldn't see Nwan. Don't worry, Ling Ling, your dad and I will watch Nwan's real body. You don't have to worry about Nwan peeing on you. Before going to bed, Mother Wang explained the situation to Wang Ling in all seriousness. Hearing this, Wang Ling was stunned. What he was worried about, it wasn't his little sister peeing and pooping. He did have a talisman on him, but the problem was that Nwan didn't. Even if it was a shadow, it was still very scary. Who the hell would go to school with a nuclear bomb on their back? Wang Ling dropped his forehead into his hand. It felt like his head was hurting. But Father and Mother Wang were exceptionally firm on this matter, and he himself felt exceptionally helpless. Thus, he could only ask Wang Ming for help. Wang Ming had already returned to his lab. Wang Ling remembered that there were backup talisman seals in the lab, which were stronger than one-time use ones. But Wang Ling couldn't guarantee their compatibility. Although he and Nwan were brother and sister, they were different models. Wang Ling didn't know whether the talisman seal would work on Nwan. Wang Ming also seemed particularly curious about this. Oh, right. You've reminded me, Lingzi. Earlier, I thought we should also do a talisman experiment on little girl Nwan. Why don't we take this opportunity to test it out? Also, it'll help me push forward with subsequent research on new talismans. It can be considered reference data. Wang Ming said excitedly. When he had returned to the country earlier, he had remembered that there was something he hadn't done. Now that Wang Ling had asked him, he suddenly remembered. Ah, that's right. There are 2 experiments this time. How about we do them together? Wang Ming said at that moment. After I returned to the laboratory, I extracted a substance from the mysterious black stone and diluted it into a black spirit liquid. This spiritual liquid has a very strong suppressive effect. Dripping it on a magic tool can cause it to have a sealing effect for a short time. It's a pity that I've damaged more than a dozen sacred tools. Wang Ming said, didn't you enchant the golden pacifier that you wanted to give to Anwan? I don't think it will be damaged by this black spirit liquid. Why don't you ask Anwan to cooperate with us and conduct an experiment on this black liquid? I want to see how far you can suppress it. Wang Ling, safe. Of course it's safe. Don't you believe in the things your brother invented? Wang Ming folded his arms and said solemnly, the worst-case scenario is that the earth explodes. You can always switch it back after the explosion. Wang Ling, when all was said and done, Wang Ling wasn't a demon. There was no way he would use his own little sister as a lab rat. The stability of the black spirit liquid extracted from the black stone was unknown at the moment. If it was too strong, it might cause some discomfort, which would have the opposite effect. For example, when Wang Ling had first worn the talisman seal, the original version had given him a very uncomfortable feeling. In the end, spirit power had accumulated in his body and directly torn the seal apart, causing a massive global blackout as well as damage to electrical appliances in the core region. Wang Ling had still been young at that time. Fortunately, it had only been a blackout and some electrical appliances that had been damaged. So the most heart-wrenching were the programmers pulling at their hair in front of their computer screens. After painstakingly inventing programs for so long, in the end, the screen went black and there was nothing left. Thus, Wang Ling decided to try the black spirit liquid himself. If there were no adverse reactions, he would help Anwan put some on the golden pacifier. He had chosen this pacifier as a gift for Anwan on Sun Island. It hadn't been golden at first, but pink gold. It had a market value of 980,000 Sun Island dollars. Without even thinking about it, Wang Ling had paid for it. It was just that he hadn't expected the pink gold pacifier to turn golden after he enchanted it. It didn't look the least bit foreign, and even gave off the feeling of a local tycoon. He had thought that Anwan would hate it. In the end, the little girl didn't dislike it at all. Early in the morning on Tuesday, December 21st. A drone stopped at Wang Ling's window, and Wang Ming handed him the spare talisman seal from the lab as well as the original black spirit liquid. There was only 5 milliliters of the original liquid in this bottle. It was contained in a special bottle, which looked like it was only a little bit. Touching it through the bottle, Wang Ling didn't feel anything special about the black spirit liquid at all. He took out a drop and put it on his enchanted number 60 middle school uniform jacket. In the blink of an eye, a circle of special black energy rippled out from the school uniform. This energy turned into threads and completely penetrated the school uniform jacket he was wearing without leaving any gaps. Wang Ling and Wang Nuan watched the whole process quietly. Biting the golden pacifier Wang Ling had given her, Wang Nuan lay on Wang Ling's shoulder with a pensive expression on her face. It looked like she was a little tired from the current situation. After a while, Wang Ling reached out to touch his school uniform jacket. He felt like he had been electrocuted, and his fingertips were numb, but he didn't feel any pain. Without hesitation, he directly put on his jacket as usual. After a few seconds, Wang Ling's body started to change. A pair of rabbit ears actually grew out of the top of his head and drooped down. Wang Nuan, who had been lying on Wang Ling's shoulder, was startled. But after she calmed down, the little girl very quickly and boldly reached out to touch Wang Ling's rabbit ears, and found that they were so soft that she could actually feel their bones. Was this an adverse reaction from the black spirit liquid? Wang Ling was puzzled. But very quickly, he dispelled the idea. How could there be an adverse reaction from an animal's ears? It was 100% Wang Ming that guy's doing. Just as he was about to send Wang Ming a text message to question him, Wang Ming seemed to have predicted this and directly sent him a message first. "Ah, that's right, Ling Ling, I'm working on an animal reagent, which can make the human body grow parts of an animal to make it look cute. I've always wanted to experiment with you. So I combined the reagent with the black spirit liquid. No matter what, don't take off your jacket. It's very important to ensure the experimental data. If you take it off, I'll have to do the experiment again next time." Wang Ling couldn't help sucking in a cold breath when he saw the text message. What was a devil? This was a real devil. Using the development of a new Dao talisman as an excuse to do something to him. Wang Ling felt that he had to write this down in his little notebook so that he could fight back one day. After returning from Sun Island, Wang Ling had felt that he was becoming more and more prominent, and now he had rabbit ears. If he went to school, he would be laughed at to death. The main point was that his little sister was lying on his shoulder watching him make a fool of himself. Feeling a little resentful, Wang Ling went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. In the end, he was surprised to find that this pair of droopy rabbit ears on his head was actually quite cute. Furthermore, they actually didn't look out of place when paired with him. It was more like he was wearing a hair clip cosplaying as an animal ear. But why rabbit ears? Was it because he often wore rabbit pajamas? At that moment, Wang Ling was extremely nervous. Especially when he appeared at the school gate like this, his heart was even more perturbed. Today, the person in charge of the school inspection at the school gate was the meticulous Teacher Pan. After more than a semester of interacting with Teacher Pan, Wang Ling had a deep understanding of her personality. Old Pan had always been an old-fashioned conservative and did not like her students to do fancy things. For example, boys had to have a crew cut like super chin, and even if they had bangs, it couldn't be too long, so that it would stand out with the word refreshing. For girls, Old Pan preferred ear-length short hair. It wasn't impossible for them to have long hair, but her requirement was that it shouldn't be loose, and a ponytail would be best. Now he had grown a rabbit ear to come to school. He wouldn't be able to take it off for a while, and Wang Ling felt that Old Pan would most likely scold him. Silently bowing at the school gate, Wang Ling lowered his head and moved forward, ready to pass with his little sister Meng on his shoulder. But at that moment, Old Pan's solemn voice suddenly came from behind him. "Wang Ling, wait." Wang Ling immediately stopped in his tracks. If the ancient powerhouses in the picture of the corpse had seen this scene, they would definitely have sighed in their hearts. The immortal king, who had not long ago beaten the god of the grave, who had inherited the bloodline of outer god Sothith, to the point of looking for his teeth all over the ground, would actually stop at the homeroom teacher's voice. Sure enough, the strongest humans in the universe are still the teachers in the school. "Wang Ling, why do I feel like you're a little tall and low?" Wang Ling and Wang Yuan, it was normal to have high and low shoulders, because little girl Yuan was lying on his right shoulder. Although it was just a shadow, it was really unusually heavy. Although the shadow shared half of Yuan's weight, it was still more than 40,000 jin. Seeing that Teacher Pan had called out to him, Wang Ling and Wang Yuan were startled. At that moment, Teacher Pan stretched out her hand. Yuan instantly became even more vigilant. In the end, Teacher Pan just walked over and tapped Wang Ling's back lightly. "Don't hunch. Boys should walk with their backs straight to look spirited." Wang Ling nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to leave, Teacher Pan suddenly stopped him at that moment. "Wait. What's with that thing on your head?" As soon as she said this, Wang Ling immediately knew that it was all over. Being stopped and lectured in such a shameful manner at the school gate would definitely be the focus of number 60 High's attention today. Who would have thought that old Pan, who had always been serious, would actually laugh in the next second? Wong Ling, not bad. Rabbit ears. What a fierce male rabbit. Wong Ling, she stretched out her hand to stroke Wong Ling's rabbit ears, and when she realized that they were real ears, she didn't blame him. Is it a temporary after effect of practicing some spell in secret? Since it was a real animal organ, old Pan actually wouldn't blame him. It was just that Wong Ling hadn't expected old Pan to actually think this way. She thought that he had practiced some other spell in secret, which had resulted in this after effect. Don't be nervous. This is just a temporary ear, it'll go away in a few hours. Old Pan couldn't help smiling. As a pioneer teacher at number 60 High, there had actually been a lot of similar things that had happened at the school in the past. Many body techniques and spells, inspired by spirit beasts, would cause intermittent after effects if they weren't cultivated properly or if they were cultivated too deeply. In other words, they would grow an animal organ. Back then, old Pan had seen a lot of examples of this in number 60 High, from both students and teachers. In modern cultivation schools, there was actually nothing strange about this. There were many after effects of spells. Sometimes, this kind of after effect of animalization was actually a little embellishment of cultivation life. It was much better than the ruler of some cultivation country wandering around without a mask, and thus being infected with a new virus, comical. As for the after effects of the new virus, no one knew. Perhaps it would result in a mental retardation attack, and they would have to inject disinfectant and bleach into their arms. Nowadays, even primary school students knew that this wasn't something they should do, but there were still people who actually tried it. This was the most outrageous. Back to business. In old Pan's opinion, the after effects of animalization weren't a big deal. As long as Wong Ling didn't deliberately wear cosplay headgear, old Pan wouldn't say a word. Of course, now that Wong Ling had grown a pair of rabbit ears, old Pan even thought that it wouldn't be bad if Wong Ling could keep them. After more than a semester, she had thoroughly grasped Wong Ling's taciturn personality. Such cute rabbit ears on Wong Ling's body were an indescribable contrast of cuteness. Pretty good. Before Wong Ling left, old Pan had commented on Wong Ling's rabbit with a smile on his face, making Wong Ling's heart feel a little guilty. Looking at Wong Ling's back as he left, old Pan couldn't help sighing with emotion. Sure enough, Wong Ling hadn't disappointed her. Generally speaking, most students who would take time out to study spells in private had something to pursue in their studies. During his time as a teacher in charge, Wong Ling's grades had always been above average. Even now, old Pan was a little suspicious. Was this guy deliberately suppressing his grades? How could a person who studied so hard get an average score every time? It was too unrealistic. For a whole week, Wong Ling and Lotus Sun studied as exchange students on Sun Island. They didn't need to do homework or make up for it. Not only did they live in the best rooms and enjoy the best scenery, they had also won over a large group of Grey Church disciples. When they came back, the school even gave them extra scholarships. For some of the students who were still catching up on homework during the National Day holiday, Wong Ling's group's exchange activity was definitely a source of hatred. After not seeing each other for a long time, Wong Ling naturally became the new focus of attention when he returned to school. Lotus Sun had also taken this into consideration. She was worried that Wong Ling would be surrounded by a group of people as soon as he arrived at school, and might not be used to it, so she had come to school early to answer a lot of people's questions. Student Lotus Sun, I heard that someone from Sun Island's 9 Paths High School has already cultivated to the golden egg level. Is it very xenophobic? Are they friendly to us? I want to go on a trip next year. Is the food in 9 Paths High's canteen good? How does it compare with our number 60 high schools? Lotus Sun answered every question in great detail. As long as she gave a clear answer, a lot of people who had the answers naturally wouldn't harass Wang Ling anymore. Of course, there were also some gossips that Lotus Sun didn't know how to answer. Student Lotus Sun. Is there a real octopus in the octopus ball on Sun Island? Student Lotus Sun. Is Rimi Ishihara really married? Do I still have a chance? Lotus Sun could only smile at these questions. To begin with, she didn't pay much attention to these celebrity idols. After all, given Huagua Water Curtain Group's financial resources, there wasn't a single celebrity they couldn't invite. This wasn't strange to Lotus Sun at all. After all, her monthly allowance was more than 1 billion yuan. As long as she wanted to, it wouldn't be a problem for her to have a different celebrity come to the school to broadcast the noon broadcast every day. After answering everyone's questions as skillfully and easily as possible, Lotus Sun heaved a sigh of relief. There wouldn't be so many people harassing Wang Ling anymore. However, she did not expect something to happen. When she turned around to look at the back table, Wang Ling was still surrounded by a large group of people. The point was that they weren't here to ask questions, but to watch Wang Ling's rabbit ears. Watching this scene from a distance, Lotus Sun didn't know what on earth was going on with Wang Ling's rabbit ears, but she still blushed. She felt like Wang Ling was going to get to her head. She couldn't help roaring in her heart. In a split second, her restless maiden heart overflowed. This was too cute. The group of people surrounding Wang Ling also cried out from time to time. "Ah! Awesome! Too cute! They're real rabbit ears. Damn, Wang Ling, these rabbit ears don't go well with you. Is it really an after effect of cultivating magic? Are you sure you didn't use any medicine? You did it on purpose, didn't you?" Super Chin couldn't help reaching out to tug at them. The furry touch made him feel relaxed and happy. "They really are cute," Hero Guo also praised. He felt that his family's soul pet shop should have a few more different kinds of rabbit spirit beasts. Originally, he hadn't been interested in rabbit spirit beasts. But after seeing Wang Ling, he suddenly felt that rabbits were very cute. Little bunnies could be raised too. Not just put them on the dining table. At that moment, everyone was actually thinking the same thing. It was said that young pig-headed youths didn't dream of bunny girls. They suddenly felt that it wouldn't be bad if Wang Ling could keep his rabbit ears. Wang Ling had thought that he would be completely swamped by people on his first day back at school, but the fact was that the crowd didn't even last the first class. Because the first class was Monk Jin Deng's class disguised as Teacher Fire. As soon as Jin Deng came out, he gave everyone a set of animalization spells. Since everyone was animalized, Wang Ling's rabbit ears naturally weren't an anomaly. This could be considered Jin Deng's way of smoothing things over for him. But in fact, it was Lotus Sun who had suggested this class to Jin Deng. On one hand, the girl didn't think it was good for Wang Ling to be constantly surrounded. On the other hand, when she saw some girls touch Wang Ling's rabbit ears, she felt extremely conflicted. Let them watch. Why did they even start touching him? All of them, had they never seen rabbits in the zoo? Wasn't it just a pair of rabbit ears? Ah! I want to touch them too. With this thought in mind, Lotus Sun went completely crazy. In order to stop those girls from doing anything to Wang Ling again, she immediately thought of something and entrusted Monk Jin Deng to teach such a lesson. Thus, after the animalization spells tutorial class, the whole of grade 1, class 3 completely turned into a zoo. Super Chin grew a pair of bull horns and a tail, which was very much in line with his style. It was as if Hero Guo had completely fused with his parrot Dopey, and the fur on his head had turned the color of a parrot. Lotus Sun's change was the greatest. Not only did she grow a pair of fluffy snow-white fox ears on top of her head, she actually had 9 fluffy tails behind her. Oh my god! It's a nine-tailed fox. So cute. As expected of the president of our student union. Even the animalized animals are different from other people. A lot of boys and girls were instantly attracted to Lotus Sunday. Normally speaking, she wouldn't turn into something as legendary as a nine-tailed fox. But Lotus Sun still didn't want Wang Ling to draw too much attention, so she made her animalized form look a little more amazing. When everyone's eyes were focused on her, naturally no one paid attention to Wang Ling anymore. And so, after the morning classes were over, Lotus Sun received another Wang Ling's gratitude candy in her pencil case. It was also a big white rabbit. But the packaging of this gratitude candy was a little different from the previous one. There was an extra line of small text on it, double the sugar. Thinking of how Wei Ji's chest had instantly turned into an inflatable balloon after eating the gratitude candy the last time, Lotus Sun couldn't help blushing. Wouldn't it be even more ridiculous to eat it? Wei Ji eating it last time was already very ridiculous. Putting this candy away, Lotus Sun took the initiative to use the cooling spell to calm herself down. At lunchtime, Lotus Sun cupped her chin in her hands as she sat at her desk in the student union office. All she could think about was Wang Ling's rabbit ears. She really wanted to touch it and look at it. Lotus Sun called out, wanting to ask Sun Yinger what she thought. In the end, Sun Yinger didn't reply. She realized that the usually noisy Sun Yinger had become especially well-behaved today. Not even the slightest sound could be heard. What's wrong, Inger? Why aren't you saying anything? Is Chief Shadow persecuting you again? Lotus Sun asked with a smile. Sun Yinger obediently maintained her shadow form and didn't even dare reveal her human form. She told Lotus Sun mysteriously, it's not that person's fault. It's much scarier than him. As the master of Shadow Dao, little girl Nguan was lying on Wang Ling's shoulder. Lotus Sun couldn't see her. But she could indeed see her. All through the morning class, Sun Yinger felt as if a pair of terrifying eyes were watching her from behind, making her hair stand on end. She always felt like her parents were staring at her while she did her homework. She never thought that Wang Nguan would actually split into a shadow and come to school, and from the looks of it, this pair of siblings didn't intend to tell anyone about this until now. Naturally, Sun Yinger didn't have the guts to tell anyone about Wang Nguan's existence. You're not normal, you're acting weird today, Lotus Sun muttered. Of course, she didn't have the time to think about why Sun Yinger was so well behaved today, she was too busy thinking about Wang Ling's rabbit ears. We're already an old married couple. If you want to touch it, go ahead and do it. Just do it, Sun Yinger suggested in a low voice. What old married couple, you're spouting nonsense again. Lotus Sun's face flushed red once more. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about what would happen if she directly touched it, but she always felt that it would be disrespectful to Wang Ling. She wouldn't be any different from those uneducated girls. Just as Lotus Sun was at a loss, there was a knock on the door of the student union office. Come in. Lotus Sun's thoughts quickly came back to her senses as she rested her chin on her crossed fingers. As the figure in the number 60 high uniform pushed open the door and entered, Lotus Sun saw someone who was a little flabbergasted. Classmate Kyuya Ryoko, why are you here? I'm not here to thank you. Kyuya Ryoko snorted as she crossed her arms. His words were a little too obvious. Lotus Sun couldn't help laughing. Then please sit down. Actually, she felt that she was the one who should be thanking him. Lotus Sun actually hadn't helped much with the Kyuya family matter. Li Xian had done most of the work, and she had only provided some bargaining chips for their cooperation. This time, she was going abroad with Wang Ling. This was the first time in her life that she was going out with Wang Ling. Although a lot had happened on the trip, she had also learned a lot about love from Jai Yin, and more importantly, she felt that the distance between her and Wang Ling had grown even closer. It wasn't as unreachable as it used to be. At the very least, Wang Ling now understood her feelings and was grateful to her. He even stuffed a milk candy into her pencil case when he had nothing better to do. Every time she thought of this, Lotus Sun couldn't help curling her lips into a smile. She felt that she was really a very easy person to satisfy. After Kyuya Ryoko came in, Lotus Sun very politely poured her a cup of hot tea. Normal people didn't have the privilege of having Lotus Sun personally make tea. On one hand, it was because Lotus Sun was grateful to her. On the other hand, after learning about Kyuya Ryoko and Audiobook's current progress, she completely knew that this person posed no threat at all. For example, before the first class in the morning, a lot of girls ran over to touch Wang Ling's rabbit ears. Only Kyuya Ryoko lowered her head to read her book, completely unconcerned about this matter. "Classmate Ryoko, what can I do for you?" Lotus Sun put down the hot tea. Kyuya Ryoko took the teacup, thought for a bit, and then looked up at Lotus Sunday. "Is there anything you particularly don't dislike?" Something particularly not dislike. Lotus Sun felt that she should be asking about something she particularly liked. Sure enough, tsundere and all that. Troublesome and adorable. "Didn't Senior Audiobook tell you anything?" Lotus Sun laughed. "I'm not sure, that's why I wanted to ask you in person." Kyuya Ryoko snorted, her cheeks red. As the eldest daughter of the Kyuya family, she had never humbly gone to someone else's office to ask for their opinion in order to buy a gift. In the end, Kyuya Ryoko had never expected, her first time. She had actually given it to Lotus Sunday. And most importantly, Lotus Sun was the woman whom she had always regarded as an opponent. They were clearly opponents. In the end, after facing each other, they had suddenly united, which was very miraculous. Kyuya Ryoko thought that this might be a mysterious power from the East, or a power that belonged to number 60 high alone. Compared with 9 paths and the current scale of number 60 high school, number 60 high school wasn't big enough. The average level of the students wasn't particularly high, but it felt like a big family. It was as if it could unite everyone together. Wang Ling and Lotus Sun had in fact reflected this very well. Number 60 high school had only sent a delegation of exchange students, but in the end, 9 paths and high school, which had always had a clear hierarchy, had been incorporated. Thus, Kyuya Ryoko had now officially decided to settle down in Hwasho Nation for a long time, as well as finish her studies at number 60 high school in the future. After hearing this, Lotus Sun said repeatedly, "Congratulations, classmate Kyuya. Senior Audiobook must be very happy to know." "What's there to congratulate?" Kyuya Ryoko pouted. Her words were baffling, but in fact, she couldn't deny Lotus Sun's words. Because the reason she had stayed was indeed that she didn't completely like number 60 high school's teaching style. The main reason was that she and Audiobook were in a relationship. A long-distance relationship was too hard. She hoped that she and Audiobook could go out normally. "I think it's already very obvious that I don't hate anything. Classmate Ryoko has found happiness now, but look at me, I'm still all alone." Lotus Sun sighed and sat down next to Kyuya Ryoko. It was only then that Kyuya Ryoko reacted. "What? Aren't you and classmate Wang Ling together yet?" "Who said I'm with him?" Lotus Sun's cheeks instantly turned red. "Classmate Wang Ling is a blockhead. Sorry. I thought you two had a showdown after going abroad together. I didn't expect it to still be unresolved." Kyuya Ryoko was surprised. It wasn't that she hadn't heard Audiobook mention the story between Wang Ling and Lotus Sunday. Furthermore, Audiobook had hinted to her before that she could assist him. Now that the topic was laid bare, Kyuya Ryoko instantly felt like she had a sudden epiphany. "I see." At that moment, Kyuya Ryoko cupped her chin and assumed the posture of a military counselor. "As long as I help you pursue classmate Wang Ling, the debt of gratitude between us can be written off, right? Ah, Lotus-san nodded. She actually hadn't expected this Tsundere Kyoya Ryoko to be so roundabout and direct. This guy isn't easy to deal with. Very quickly, based on her years of experience with countless men, Kyoya Ryoko came to a conclusion about the relationship between Lotus-san and Wang Ling. She said, although it's easy for a woman to pursue a man, classmate Wang Ling's personality is too abstinent. This kind of pursuit won't necessarily lead to anything. Hearing this, Lotus-san couldn't help sighing. Although it wasn't the first time she had heard someone analyze this matter, she still felt a little tired. You don't have to be so disappointed. Kyoya Ryoko hurriedly comforted her. Then, what do you want me to do? I can cooperate with you. Of course, let's make things clear first. I'm just returning a favor. It's not because I've changed my opinion of you and want to be on your side. I know. Lotus-san laughed. At that moment, she thought of Wang Ling's drooping rabbit ears again, and her heart ached. Well, classmate Ryoko, I want to ask you if you have any ideas. At that moment, the girl stretched out her 2 index fingers and gently touched them together, feeling shy and conflicted. I want to ask you if there's a more natural way. What way? Just Wang Ling's rabbit ears. I want to touch them. You want to touch the ears. Kyoya Ryoko understood. After all, he was a young man in love, and there was nothing special about wanting to touch a rabbit's ears. Can I eat the ears? Ah. I heard that these animal organs don't have pain nerves. If it really doesn't work, I'll find someone to cut off the rabbit ears for you. Then I'll make spicy rabbit ears. How can that be? Rabbits are so cute, how can you eat them? I was joking, I didn't expect you to be so serious. Kyoya Ryoko couldn't help laughing. Lotus-san, at first, she had thought that Lotus-san's feelings for Wang Ling were just for fun, but now she realized that she really liked him. If she didn't really like someone, why would she think so much about it? Unlike those uncultured girls who had directly touched Wang Ling's ears in the morning, this was the true expression of liking someone. Everything she said and did wasn't to satisfy her own selfish desires, but to wholeheartedly consider the person she liked. Of course, Kyoya Ryoko actually didn't quite understand. What was so good about Wang Ling that Lotus-san could be so infatuated with him? As school was about to end, at Kyoya Ryoko's suggestion, she rode on Lotus-san's shoulder. Both of them were wearing huge cloaks, and it looked like they were walking alone. The hand under the cloak was Lotus-san's hand. Sitting on top, Kyoya Ryoko was wearing a Jason mask, and from a distance, she looked like an unusually tall and burly man. Fully armed, the 2 women hid themselves very well as they stood guard on the side of the road, waiting for Wang Ling to pass by. Lotus-san didn't think that this kind of disguise would work on Wang Ling. Given the youngster's eyesight, he would definitely be able to tell that it was the 2 of them under the cloak. But Kyoya Ryoko didn't know Wang Ling's true strength, which was why she felt that this method would work. Really? Classmate Ryoko, don't worry. Leave the talking to me. When the time comes, you just need to take your hand out from under the cloak. Kyoya Ryoko was full of confidence. Under the cloak, Lotus-san dropped her forehead into her hand and suddenly felt a little regretful. Given the lack of information, she shouldn't have rashly asked Kyoya Ryoko to participate in the operation. Coming, watch out. At that moment, Kyoya Ryoko coughed softly to warn Lotus-san that Wang Ling was about to pass by. It was Kyoya Ryoko's first time riding on Lotus-san's shoulder in this position. In fact, Kyoya Ryoko was a little regretful that she had suggested this idea. The main thing was that she hadn't considered that after carrying it out, Kyoya really wanted to slap herself to death, because when she had ridden Lotus-san's shoulder, her calf had happened to rub against the girl's soft part. Damn it, she was clearly 4 years younger than her. Why did she develop so well? Kyoya Ryoko's heart was on the verge of collapse. Although Lotus-san wasn't particularly outrageous at the moment, it was clear that there was a lot of room for growth. She was only 16 years old, and she already had this much potential. If she was a little older, it would be terrible. If she grew up to be a wife, she would probably be even scarier. Hello, classmate. Seeing Wang Ling pass by, Kyoya Ryoko used a voice-changing spell to stop him. Wang Ling paused, and together with Wang Wan, he looked at Kyoya Ryoko, who was wearing a Jason mask, and Lotus-san, who was covered by the cloak under Kyoya Ryoko. Classmate, we're in the middle of a blessing activity. As long as you let us touch your head, you'll get a snack, Kyoya Ryoko, who was wearing a Jason mask, said in a rough voice. At the same time, Lotus-san very cooperatively took out a golden limited edition crispy noodle snack from under the cloak. This was winter limited edition. It was a sweet ice-flavored crispy noodle snack. The whole crispy noodle snack was sweet. It was different from the pepper-sprinkled versions in the past. Looking at this scene, Wang Ling was dazed. This crispy noodle snack was indeed limited. But the truth was that Wang Ling had already eaten it long ago. His heart was as calm as an ancient well, and he wasn't even that surprised. On his shoulder, Nwan bit her finger and looked like she wanted to eat it. Do you want to eat it? Wang Ling poked on Nwan's soft little face. Little girl Nwan nodded solemnly. And so, without saying anything else, Wang Ling walked over to Kyoya Ryoko and Lotus-san, who were hiding under the cloak. When the youngster's familiar aura drew near, Lotus-san could clearly feel her own heartbeat. Thump 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 thump, she had never thought that she would be so nervous. Then, in front of Kyoya Ryoko and Lotus-san, Wang Ling bent down and stuck his head out. With a flushed face, the girl slowly stretched out her hand. With one glance, Wang Ling recognized that it was Lotus-san's hand. She was trembling nervously, her fingers trembling. At that moment, Wang Ling sighed silently. He took another step forward and voluntarily stuck his head out. Ah! I touched it! Lotus-san cried out excitedly in her heart. The moment her fingertips touched the rabbit's ear, a huge plume of steam spurted out from under the cloak. Kyoya Ryoko jumped in fright. Riding on Lotus-san's shoulder, she suddenly felt a tremendous propulsion force beneath her. When she regained her senses, the powerful propulsion force generated by the terrifying steam beneath her had already lifted the two of them more than 10 meters off the ground. Chapter 1609. After returning home that night, Wang Ling sorted out the data from today's experiment. The first was the black spirit liquid. For the time being, Wang Ling hadn't detected any other abnormalities or sequelae. Or rather, after putting on the school uniform jacket which had been dripped with the black spirit liquid, he felt that the pressure on the Dao talisman seal on his body had lessened considerably. As for the animal reagent that Wang Ming had developed, until now, the rabbit ears were still on Wang Ling's head. He felt that it had been a little too long, and when he got home, he manually expelled the reagent from his body. The animal reagent was an inhalation reagent, which meant that he just needed to expel the reagent from his body. In a normal situation, Wang Ling could raise his sword fingers and then, like that Duan Yu in martial arts movies, expel the alcohol with his fingertips after getting drunk. He could expel the qi from his body. But because he was at home, Wang Ling was worried that the process of expelling the air could easily cause an explosion. Thus, he chose a very honest method. That was, by drinking water and urinating, he would expel the poison through the circulation in his body. The kidney function of an immortal king was just that powerful. No matter what poison it was. There was nothing that couldn't be solved by peeing. If it didn't work, then he would pee again. Wang Ling thought about the village head of Holy Water Village from back then as he went to the toilet. he didn't know how things were developing over there. Maybe the next time he went over there, the whole village would turn into an animal village, right? Because the black spirit liquid that had been dripped on the school uniform jacket was still in effect for a short period of time. That night was the first night Wang Ling had slept soundly in a while. He just wore his school uniform jacket to sleep. He didn't have to think about anything, and he didn't have to worry that his snoring would blow up the earth. It was a very comfortable feeling. But Wang Ling was also keenly aware that this kind of comfort wouldn't last for too long. That was because Wang Ming currently couldn't prove whether the black spirit liquid extracted from the black stone would make Wang Ling resistant. After all, the Dao Talisman seal that Wang Ling was using now had a much shorter duration and effectiveness than before because of his increasing resistance. The black stone and the black spirit liquid were substances that had a completely new inhibitory effect on Wang Ling. Although Wang Ming had to conduct several experiments, he had to ensure that they were used in a planned manner. This was to prevent Wang Ling from suddenly developing strange antibodies one day. Although Wang Ling was sleeping soundly, Lotus Sun's situation wasn't very good. The main thing was that after touching Wang Ling's rabbit ears, the stimulation had been too great. Even now, she could still feel the soft and warm sensation in her hand. Tonight, she could not bear to wash her hands. Say. Classmate Wang Ling clearly knows that the person in the cloak is me, but he didn't avoid me, and even moved his head closer. Doesn't that mean he likes me? Sun Ying'er was silent for a moment. She didn't dare say that it was because his little sister was too hungry that Wang Ling had taken the initiative to stick out his head in exchange for that crispy noodle snack. Of course, the main reason was because of Wang Yuan. She was too afraid that Wang Yuan would get angry and close her access again. If she passed this stage, she would be bullied by Wang Ying again. Although the number of times she used the planet drumming spell had decreased recently, her younger sister's waist couldn't help but ache when she thought about it. This world was really too unfriendly to delicate and beautiful girls. Hey, why aren't you saying anything? You're acting weird today. No. I'm not. Sun Ying'er didn't dare show her true form. She was usually carefree, but now she looked a little timid. Actually, she was afraid that if she showed her true form, all her expressions would be written on her face. She had never been someone who could hide her expression. Hey, when will we be able to hold hands all the time? Lotus Sun lay on her pillow and pondered that night. She fantasized that one day she would be able to travel alone with Wang Ling without anyone else. Just Wang Ling and herself. The two of them would enjoy the beautiful scenery along the way on a slow transport, and feel the wind on the lakeshore while holding hands. That kind of scene seemed to only exist in shoujo comics, and Lotus Sun yearned for it. But reality and fantasy were very far apart. She was well aware that as long as there was a peanut, she wouldn't let her imagination run wild. The next morning, Wang Ling woke up from a very sound sleep. When he woke up, he saw Loopy Toad standing naked in its human form next to him, and he was actually being hugged by the bed fairy he had enlightened. Wang Ling got up and gave Loopy Toad a surprised look. Although this wasn't the first time he had learned that Loopy Toad was green from head to toe, it still felt a little strange in its human form. Loopy Toad covered its private parts with an exceptionally helpless expression on its face. You can't blame me for this. It explained the series of events that had happened so far to Wang Ling. You can't change back. Wang Ling was extremely astonished when he heard this. Loopy Toad actually remained in its human form and couldn't change back. The point was that Loopy Toad was currently only holding out one hand, which shouldn't have happened. Wang Ling felt that the world seemed a little strange today. He opened the door to the bathroom in the bedroom. Then, he was astonished to find that the originally empty bathroom was now full of people. The gremlins who had been enlightened by Loopy Toad were also in human form and couldn't change back. Sink, toothbrush, and cup. Lord Ma looked at Wang Ling with an embarrassed expression on his face. My lord, do you want to go to the bathroom? If you don't mind. Saying this, Lord Ma opened his mouth. Wang Ling was alarmed by this scene and silently closed the bathroom door. Somehow, he felt that there was something wrong with the way he had opened the door, but even Wang Ling himself wasn't sure what the current situation was. The great enchantment spell was already relatively mature, unlike the single curse, which always had bugs, which shouldn't have happened. Wang Ling opened the door to look for Father Wang and Mother Wang. In the end, he was astonished to find two cute maids in maid outfits with qilin horns on their heads standing on either side of Father Wang in the living room. One was called Kato. The other was called Eagle. These were the left and right hands which Wang Ling had enlightened Father Wang in order to deal with the grave god last time. Who would have thought that they would also turn from qilin arms into qilin maids? Ling Ling, did you do this? Father Wang had an indescribably complicated expression on his face. He didn't know whether to be happy or sad. Wang Ling shook his head and immediately denied it. He had become like this when he woke up. Who the hell knew what had happened? At that moment, the maid on the left called Kato forked a piece of fruit and held it to Father Wang's mouth. When Father Wang opened his mouth, it directly turned into a huge eagle's beak. Wang Ling thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, and reached out to touch it. In the end, he found that Father Wang had really turned into an eagle. Furthermore, it was an eagle without wings. Because his left and right hands had already become maids, I don't feel particularly uncomfortable. At that moment, Father Wang said in all seriousness, I don't have hands, so I can ask for leave from my book friends and say that I can't write anymore. Wang Ling, saying this, he blushed as he looked at the qilin maids on either side of him. Also, I think this is pretty good. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a howl from behind the sofa. A huge white tiger appeared and immediately bit down on Father Wang's eagle head. Wang Ling sucked in a cold breath. Mother Wang had actually turned into a white tiger. Chapter 1610. The phenomenon of Earth's cultivators turning into animals had come very suddenly. Wang Ling had been sitting cross-legged at home for a long time, and had investigate similar incidents on Earth. Using the power of Shadow Dao to trace the shadows of everyone on Earth, he could easily find out what was going on. And Wang Ling didn't need to do much, he just needed to gently stroke little girl Wan's little head to get the information. The results were unexpected. Wang Ling and Wang Wan saw that all cultivators below the nascent soul stage had suffered. Furthermore, everyone had been turned into animals to different degrees. Some had turned into animals or even spirit beasts. Some, like Wang Ling yesterday, had only turned into animal or spirit beast organs. As for the enlightened gremlins in the Wang family's small villa and Loopy Toad's inability to restore themselves after taking human form, this was a little like abnormal feedback before a major earthquake. Could it be that it foretold that the people affected would spread to even higher realms? Wang Ling was a little lost. He could repair and restore the people around him with his magic power, but if it was the cultivators who radiated to the entire Earth, it would actually be risky. Even if there was only a 1 in a billion chance that someone would be able to trace the source of the magic power, Wang Ling didn't want to take the risk. After using magic power to restore Father Wang, Mother Wang, Loopy Toad, and the gremlins at home to their original appearances, Father Wang had a particularly regretful expression on his face. Ling Ling, this is where you're wrong. It's not easy for your father to type, it's not easy for him to get 2 maids. After saying this, Father Wang let out a pained scream. The reason was that Mother Wang had ruthlessly pinched his thigh, which was the most tender piece of flesh during the test, and Father Wang had knelt down on the spot in pain. Mother Wang turned on the TV and saw that it was also reporting this incident. The female anchor of the morning news channel had also suffered a phenomenon of animal transformation. Her skin had turned into a leopard print. Breaking news. Currently, cultivators below the nascent soul stage all over the world have suddenly shown signs of animals or spirit beasts. This is called the animal transformation incident. Experts say that this incident may become a great turning point for human cultivators on Earth to advance into the future and advance. The overall situation was developing very quickly. Because it was strange, it could only be judged based on experience. Wang Ling felt that there were several possibilities. The first was that Wang Ming's animal chemical reagent had leaked out. Because it was an inhalation type that floated in the air, it was very easy to accidentally injure someone. However, the strange thing was that even if the inhaled animalization reagent leaked out, it was impossible for it to drift so far. On a global scale, how could just a few small canisters in Wang Ming's lab radiate radiation over such a large area? Of the remaining few possibilities, Wang Ling felt that it might be someone with ulterior motives. At the very least, it had to be an almighty at true immortal level or above who had activated a global taboo array. Wang Ling called Wang Ming and specially used a video call, mainly to see what kind of animal Wang Ming had become. Unexpectedly, after Wang Ming agreed to the call, the scene in front of them actually looked normal. He wore a thick, custom-made protective suit to block the radiation during the process of studying the black stone. He had specially enchanted the protective suit, so it was extremely safe. "It's probably because of that black stone," said Wang Ming. The mysterious black stone in the lab had the effect of shielding spirit power. If an almighty had set up a large-scale array, the power of the array wouldn't have been able to reach the lab, and Wang Ming had smoothly escaped being turned into an animal. He looked at Wang Ling, a crafty smile on his face under his closed glass helmet. "Why did you think of video calling me today? Or do you want to see what kind of animal I've become?" As he said this, he switched the image to the computer screen in his lab. The image on the screen was of Wang Ling growing those rabbit ears yesterday. During class, someone had actually taken a picture of him lying on his desk with his eyes closed to rest. "Hey, do you know how much I spent on this photo? Also, it took me a lot of effort to restore the mosaics." Wang Ling drew in a deep breath. It looked like Wang Ming had won yesterday's game. It was just a photo, and one that didn't even show Wang Ling's face. Wang Ling felt that it was fine if it had been taken. After all, the man in front of him was still working hard to develop new talismans for him, so it didn't matter if he got some benefits now and then. On the contrary, Wang Ling was more curious. How much had Wang Ming spent on this photo yesterday, and who had sold it to him? In short, Wang Ling had already written down the animalization reagent and the purchase of the photo in his little notebook. Speaking of which, he had a habit of writing down little notebooks. Wang Ling suddenly realized that he had learned it from Lotus Sun. After the call ended, Wang Ling had a general idea of what had happened with the animalization incident. If the reagent in Wang Ming's lab hadn't leaked, then someone else must have been behind it. After breakfast, Wang Ling was about to go out, when Mother Wang suddenly called him. "Ling Ling. You can't go out like this." "Wang Ling, ? "Mother Wang, all cultivators below the nascent soul stage have now been turned into animals, and it's likely that the students in your class will be the same. If you acted normally now, wouldn't it be strange instead?" It had to be said that Mother Wang's words did make sense. After thinking about it, Wang Ling could only raise his hand and change the rabbit ears from yesterday back. It was just that the rabbit ears this time weren't made with a reagent. Instead, they were real illusions, which were created using the King's Eyes illusion spell. Like the rabbit ears from yesterday, they had a sense of touch, warmth, and could be touched. After the rabbit ears grew back, Mother Wang couldn't help taking several photos in a row as she shouted, "Aw, aw. My son is too cute. By the way, Ling Ling, do you still want a little brother? It'd be great if you could have a nest of rabbits." As soon as she said this, Father Wang and Wang Ling both sucked in cold breaths. Both father and son felt the radiance of motherhood from Mother Wang. After a moment, Mother Wang smiled with a flushed face. I'm just kidding. Right now, it's more important to raise on Wang first. A nest of rabbits. At that moment, Father Wang heaved a sigh of relief. His son with long rabbit ears was cute. But a nest of rabbits was a little too outrageous. Who knew if it would be suns or nuclear bombs? That day, when Wang Ling came to class, many people in class had asked for leave. Hero Guo wasn't here either. According to Super Chin, it was said that his family's human-shaped parrot, Dopey, had tied him up at home. It's probably over by now. At that moment, Super Chin sighed at Wang Ling in a smoke after the event. Wang Ling, you're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.